Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 1, in the middle of chapter 154. Kufnun Ches, middle of page 158, sorry. 158, the middle of page 314, is the middle of Discourse 40 of Ayin Beis, which began Shavuos 1912, and now we're in the middle of the Maimer of Mates, not 1913. So it's a year and some months into the Hamshach. So it's Discourse 40, and as I've explained many times, it's one long flow. So briefly, just to get up to speed, where we're at is the first section we'll divide into sections of Ayin Beis, addressed mapping out, you can say, the cosmic picture, the cosmic map. And that is essentially that there are two tracks of energy in existence. One is what we call a finite, immanent, integrated energy, and then we have an infinite, transcendent energy. And one energizes and sustains existence, so it's commensurate with the structure of existence, and the other transcends existence, which allows us the relief and the ability to get beyond our structures and our routines and all that confines us in this world. In the classic example of these two energies, is on the microcosmic level, which is Elam Katan, that we are, each human being is a small universe. We're created in the divine image, so we too have, we'll call immanent, integrated, internalized faculties. That's the 10 faculties. Eser Koiches HaNefesh, from Chachma through Malchus, intelligence in the mind, the different emotions, the different abilities that we have, whether it's the power of vision in the eye, the power of sight in the eye, the power of hearing in the ears. So everything has what we call its Eir and Keli, its energy and its container. So immanent energy is defined by an energy manifesting within a container, internalized. And what is the transcendent within our faculties? That's called Ratzon. On Kabbalistic terms, Keser. Ratzon Keser is the transcendent. It's also part of, somewhat connected to the structure as well, but it's outside of the structure. And this is a second track that introduces into existence, well, first of all, introduces into our life something that is beyond just the regular faculties. And in the cosmic picture, in the macrocosmic picture, it introduces the transcendent, the Keser of Atzilus, the Keser of the higher worlds, introduces the divine desire, which is the divine plan, into the structure. So these two energies work side by side. One, again, is a flow that's regulated and very much is commensurate, defined, proportionate to that which is sustaining, and the other is more of a hovering, transcendent one. And of course, the big challenge and question in Ayin Beis is the interface. How can a finite, mortal, and limited existence connect to something that is infinite and unlimited and immortal, without one annihilating the other, is the key. And that is the basis of the whole relationship that we have with the divine, the basis of the Torah, the basis of Judaism. And that's the presenting challenge, I would say, in all of Kabbalah and Chassidus, but Ayin Beis particularly because it's such a magnum opus and captures that theme in the full glory. And the Rebbe Rashab is going through, as we've described it many times, like literally every switch, every link between level and level, because an interface is not one interface. Interface is millions of interfaces. It's like, think of the human body. How many switches have to be working for something to function? So the same thing here, these are switches. And we've tried to, as we're going along, trying to somewhat have some sense of the map, trying to identify different switches. Where we are right now, and I'll bring it up now, is a longer discussion where the Rebbe Rashab is talking much about where Gvul meets Bli Gvul, basically. Where the finite meets the infinite. And in doing so, first he discussed that this is similar to the context of the difference between the Avos and Matan Torah. The Avos represent a stage in history, but they also represent a stage in Avodah, which means in all of us, a stage in the maturity process. So just to to capture it like in a more of a graphic, you could say, or even a poetic way, think of it this way. The existence is created. Bereshis bara Elokim. What do you have working right there? Elokim immediately tells you, and every day something else was created. Asara Marmaris. These are the 10, based on the 10 spheres. God created a structured universe. That's a given. It's the first chapter in Genesis, basically, what the structure looks like. Obviously, there are more details, but basically an elaborate structure of many, many details that all work in a cohesive and coordinated fashion. And then he places the human being into this garden, into earth, and says, La'avdil Shamra, I want you now to not just be a good person, I want you to elevate this universe. I want you to reconnect with me. I want you to, in the language of Dira B'Tachtenim, I want you to take this mundane material universe that on its own potentially can go on its own course. Because as we explained here, the energy of the divine energy it has to be concealed for this existence to emerge. Because if the divine unity was all-encompassing, if the divine unity was manifesting all over, there would be no room for any individual identity to emerge. Welcome all. If you need more chairs, they're in here. There are plenty of chairs, but you have here. Okay. So there is an inherent so-called paradox, you can actually say, because on one hand, the divine essence and the divine presence is all-encompassing. It's we call indivisible and omnipresent. So therefore, that fundamentally needs to be concealed for any independent entity to arise. On the other hand, how do you then reconnect an independent entity with this all omnipresent reality without annihilating it? Which is, of course, again, the challenge of the interface, the whole interface of Ayin Beis. So as such, this is where the Ovis and Matan Torah come in. The Ovis role was primarily. Well, I should go back to the Gan Eden. So a human being was put into on earth to create this bridge, to create the bridge. However, as we know, the story goes that immediately, instead of creating a bridge, they actually created more of a schism. By eating from the tree of knowledge, what happened was a split took place. So essentially, the entity that God created, for it to reconnect, essentially went on its own. It began to have its own identity, and in simple psychological terms, self-interest became more important than the divine interest. And now you have two perspectives. And it just got worse and worse. As we learned in the Medrash Shir Shirim Rabbah that everyone knows from Basar Lagani, 7 subsequent generations, each one concealed the divine even further, with the Shekhinah going to Rakia, the second heaven, the third heaven. Basically the split between the machine and its maker began to intensify, to the point of the Mabul, where there was a self-destruction, and the whole thing collapsed. And then the rebuilding began. But where does the real rebuilding begin? With Avram Avinu. So the process is reversed with Avram and the Ovis that began to realign existence with its purpose. But it's a slow process. That's why it's again 7 generations until Moshe Rabbeinu. And the example I was giving was, think of it this way. If the first track I was describing of immanent energy is like the pipelines, and the energy flows through them, the pipelines are set in motion, but what happens if they get corroded? And they get blocked, or the arteries get hardened or blocked. So you need some type of surge going back to the source. So the way he describes it, that the Ovis go back to the mouth of the well and reconnect and create a new energy, an energy flowing from the beginning, but that will like flush through these corroded pipes. So to realign the structure of existence with what their purpose is. So in health terms, that would be essentially a person being able to, if you were technically able to do that, pump go back to the heart and like get it pumping to the point that the blood just washes out all the grime and all the toxins and all the blockages and so on. That's what the Ovis did. Obviously, it was a hard work. But what they did not do was they were not able to transform the pipes into making them forever immune to any corruption. And that's what Matan Torah came to do. An Er Chadash, an unprecedented energy from the Er HaBligvul. So again, to sum up everything I was just saying, that we have two tracks of energy: immanent energy, transcendent energy, and the others primarily focus on the immanent, but not just immanent energy of existence, because to create existence, maintain existence, you don't need any special effort. But to create a so-called a healthy existence, an aligned existence, there you do. And there you need to go to the Er HaBlikvul, as he put it. You need something of transcendent power to help you realign the structure. And that's what the others did. They went as close as you can where Gvul meets Blikvul to be able to reconnect and create a playing field where they lay the ground that then the next stage would come in Matan Torah. So just for the record, even though he hasn't said it specifically, where are we today? Matan Torah did its job. It opened up the door of a completely new type of energy, but then still the work is still to be done. Mashiach is basically the realization of an existence that's completely aligned with the finite energy, and the infinite energy will become one. But that's not possible until the finite pipes are completely primed and ready for it. So Matan Torah helps, the others help, and then the Matan Torah helps. But now comes all that work, and we are basically the end of that process, according to the Rebbe. So that just places the whole thing in context. But we're still dealing with an existence that has structure and plenty of concealment, at least in people's perception. So there's plenty to do, at least from our, let's call it, psychological perspective. Because our minds still think very much limited terms. We're survival creatures, we're social creatures, we're social animals. And most people are focused on self-interest, basically. And so we still got the challenges, but I'm not going to go into the whole discussion of that. So what does it mean Mashiach is right on the threshold? I mean, briefly, the answer to that is that a lot of work has been done, and the eruption is just a moment away. So it's really beneath the surface, and we have to still do some things to align ourselves, because if you're not awake to the possibility or to the concept, it can't be your reality. Like something great is happening, but you're asleep. So to go back to where we are in Ayin Beis, so in this section, He's concluded with the Avos Matan Torah, as I said, the finite energy, aligning it to the best possible way, and to the point where you can be prepared for Matan Torah to receive the transcendent. Now, where we are right now in this chapter, I went through this introduction also because it's obviously such a complicated discussion. We are in this chapter begins a question. And as I said before, basically Ayin Beis, Chassidus in general, Kabbalah and also in general, is essentially switches. It's about getting each switch in place. I mean, just like a healthy alignment in the human body is not just a general thing. Different parts of the body need different type of exercise and different type of avodah, different type of nutrients to make it work properly. Right? The same thing is in Seder Shtalshus. So just think of it as a large organism. It has millions of switches, and if you want a healthy alignment, you have to cover every aspect, every detail. In general, there are 10 spheres. There are 4 worlds, 4 dimensions. But in particular, there are many more levels, and the bottom line is that the real Chassidus, the purpose of Chassidus, is not just to understand these switches, but to understand what we can do to correct or repair a switch. And literally, in each piece of Ayin Beis, he goes through another one of these switches. Interfaces, essentially. And that's the key. And the key is the avodah, the work that's necessary in each one of these steps. So just to use a general example, we're leading to where we are, then I'll go over this chapter where we're in the middle of. In a way, in a microcosmic and macrocosmic way, the Rebbe Rashab talks about these 2 tracks in 2 ways. The microcosmic way, it's Moichin and Midas. That we human beings really are based on, we're intelligent creatures and we're emotional creatures. Primarily we're emotional, and most of our major decisions are emotional ones. But presumably, we also have, not presumably, we actually do have intelligence, and presumably we were supposed to be using it. So we do use our intelligence, but most of our intelligence is used in a very animalistic way, survival way. We use our intelligence to survive better. That's a moichin that is being controlled by midas. What is moichin that's not being controlled by midas? Is an intelligence that allows you to get outside of yourself and beyond yourself. That's transcendence. At transcendence, that's where love comes in. That's the ability to have relationship, and that's the ability to reach God and have relationship with God. As long as self-interest is your driving entity, you're trapped in your own survival mode, which is where most people are. And even those of us that are aware of something else, the natural inclination is back to survival. You get physically hungry, that's what's going to take over. When you're desperate for anything that is in this material plane, that takes over. Our sensory tools, our eyes, our ears, our taste, touch, and smell, control most of our attention. You walk down the street, you're affected by what you see and hear and taste, touch, and smell. So the idea of getting to a transcendent place is always an effort. Like he says in Tanya, the battle never ends. So no one should ever delude themselves that it's like, no matter, I'll do 1, 2, 3 and the battle is over. It's not the case. The battle never ends. And that's the way it was meant to be. That there's this battle because the material world has those tentacles that hold. The Tzimtzum HaRishon is doing its job very efficiently. And you have to always contend with it. And no matter what, it's always there. Not only when there's suffering and pain, God forbid, or real, disaster and trauma, but at all times, there's a concealment, period. Life is a dark place. Survival is the driving force. So what God blessed us with is mechin, mind. And what is a mind able to do? A mind can take you can dream, you can imagine, you can fantasize, you can think of things that are greater than your immediate needs. The mind essentially becomes one of the switches, one of the key interfaces, which is why Chabad is Chabad. Chassid is Chabad. Chabad, to take you to a place, we'll call it a cognitive raft, that takes you to a place that your emotions on their own will not go. And once you are able to envision intellectually of something greater and transcendent, then the goal is to get it back to the emotions that they also should be interested. Which is essentially the process of Moichin training Midas. What he calls the maturity of the Midas, Gadlus HaMidas. In a way, what we do in the Sfir Seimer now, that we focus on different components of the 49 emotions. What's the goal? To look at how your chesed is, how your gvura, how your teferes, and then the details, chesed shebechesed, gvura shebechesed, with the goal of being what, like we say in the Hiratz, to be mezachich, to refine, to look at the emotion, not just allow it to whatever it is. That's how I'm wired. A leopard can't change its spots. No, it's not correct. You can refine and you can elevate. You can tame, guide, and refine your emotions, and you can direct them. By no means an easy process, but nevertheless it's doable, and that's the whole point of what a human being is capable of. And only when we do that do we really deserve the title human. Without that, we are no different than the beast in the wild, following our impulses. And Tanya is also, this is a very fundamental part of Tanya as well. Because the whole idea of Moich Shal Talalev, the whole idea of the ability to self-control, that the mind, that the Nefesh Elokis rests in the mind, the Nefesh HaBamis in the heart. Chapter 9, chapter 12, these are key chapters that set out the psychology of Chassidus Chabad, which is that though we are emotional creatures, and though the animal soul is interested in survival and self-interest and is impulsive, yet we also have a mind. And though the blood of the heart feeds the brain, so too the emotions can take control of our minds. But it also works the other way around. Moich Shal Talev, the Rebbe's big chiddush, also unprecedented chiddush, is that the mind by nature, not acquired, but inherently has the power to control the heart. And you can't suppress a person's impulses, but you can, in other words, you can't suppress the actual impulse, but you can control it. And you can tame it, and you can align it, you can channel it.
But it's a chiddush. This was always.
No, it says nowhere in any sefer that I've ever found. Moich Shal Talev says in the Zohar Pasha Pinchas. The Alter Rebbe says that in Perek Yud Beis. But then he adds, "B'tevet tel dosei, v'tevet yitzirosei." That I don't think I've ever seen anyone write that. You can make the argument it's education. Children avde befkere nichale yetzid leva adam ramin urav, and Moich Shal Talev is we educate someone to control, but it's acquired as opposed to inherent. That's why I said it's a chiddush. Not Moich Shal Talev is a chiddush, that it's natural. Very strong argument can be. The Freudian psychology will argue adamantly against that it's not at all natural. The natural is selfishness. That's why it's such a big chiddush, because it's a critical point. And if when you think about it, it sounds so obvious, because the whole Torah would fall apart. If self-control was acquired and your natural selfishness is inherent, everyone knows inherent can never always beats acquired at the end of the day, in the big picture. How long can you control yourself, so to speak? And even if you do, it's not complete. But that's a longer other discussion. I'm just saying it in context because Meichin Midas becomes a very powerful factor in this discussion here. Now, Meichin leads you to a place called Keser. Once your mind, especially Chachma, is able to sense something beyond you, then it leads you to a place where you're able to enter into Bligvul. We can think about Bligvul, even though you can say we can't really tangibly touch the infinite. And we probably can't even explain the infinite. We can't talk about or explain beyond time and space. Like you made it very clear. Because we are creatures of time and space. It's hard to imagine when you say, Bereshis bara Elokim. Okay, so what was the second before? And then you're told there was no second before because second was created. Even to get our minds around that is like, what is that 1 second? We accept it, but when you start thinking, okay, so, because it's hard for us to understand what means there was no before, because before itself was created. So what does it mean? Now, that doesn't mean we can't at all talk about it. It just means that it's difficult. But the challenge is really to get beyond materialistic thinking of time and space and start realizing that there are examples. But the bottom line is that we can enter that place because God, who is beyond it, is also part of us. If we were not created in the divine image, we would not have ability to go in a place like that. And that's really what most prevalent philosophies hold, that a human being that reaches a ceiling. Because by nature we simply have finite, maybe it's a very high ceiling, but how far can you go? It's only the mystics, and even non-Jewish mystics, that really argue that you can go farther than just, that there is no ceiling. But in Torah, for sure, there's no question that that's possible, only because God created existence and embedded a code in there that allows you to move from the finite into the infinite. Now, how to do that is not an academic exercise. It's a personal exercise. It requires you actually to be there. It's like if you're not going to be there, someone can explain it to you all day, you're not going to experience it. Experience comes through working on yourself. So essentially, the second track, or the macrocosm of Meichin and Midas, what I just said. So Midas, let's say, is the structure of existence in full glory. Midas, existence is me. What do I feel? What's in it for me? That's the structure of existence in our universe. Not in Atzilus. In Atzilus, it's all aligned, but in our universe. Then we talk about the mind taking you to a place beyond your self-interest. And then the mind taking you to a place that's God's interest, the divine interest, Keser. And there too, there are many levels. So whatever I'm saying is very general. There are many levels, as we've been discussing. You can do something for the divine, but it's still because it's good for you. You can do something for the divine, even if it's not good for you. All these type of things we'll be reviewing soon again. And on the macrocosmic picture, these 3 steps, what I just said, using more Chassidish language now, the spheres, is that there's 10 spheres of Atzilus. And there everything is aligned. There's a structure, it's aligned. It leads you into Keser, into Bligvul. And how it is in the bigger picture is that there's the 10 hidden spheres, which is the root of the energies of existence, of the structure of existence. There's the actual structure. And then there is the Ir HaBligvul. This is the divine field of energy before it has any type of specific manifestation. And just in palatable terms, think of it this way. Think of an artist, an infinite artist, who has infinite possibilities to create art. Literally infinite. This is called Spheres Enketz. You can make billions, trillions, infinite spheres, infinite manifestations of his artistic energy. Then he chooses, among all these, in the infinite possibilities, he chooses one possibility, which is really just a piece of the infinite possibilities. That one possibility is the 10 spheres as we know them, Chochmah through Malchus. So those 10 spheres are really saturated and infused with a Bligvulic energy on the divine, on the artist, from the artist's perspective. But then he wants an existence like ours. So now he needs a canvas and a palette and paint and an actual image that will reflect these 10 spheres that in his mind, this is the art he wants to create. For it to be able to manifest. So what he has is also a power called the second track, the power of creating Kelim, what's called Koyach HaGvul. So just like there's the infinite possibilities, he also has one finite possibility. And here are the containers. What are the containers? In terms of art, let's say blue, green, red, or shapes, different shapes, and so on. But in the artist's mind and the artist's psyche, they're still all part of this infinite pool, soup, you can say. Then comes the tzimtzum in order to allow for the art to manifest. If the tzimtzum does not happen, what happens, all this is very nice. It's all but part of the Godhead. It's all part of the divine omnipresence. The tzimtzum allows for the artist now to take up the paint and place it on the canvas and start painting. Here's chokhmah, here's bina, here's chesed, and of course let's call it permutations that create existence as we know it. All the details. In Atzilus, it's a piece of art that everybody can see is aligned with the artist. In Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya, the art starts becoming disconnected from its maker, and you can come to a point, hey, look at this beautiful world. I don't even know if there's an artist, or I don't see the artist, and I'm on my own. That's how far it can wander. But it all originates in an artist that envisioned it all. And we have to, and we're able to connect level to level. So first we have to connect the art to a maker, to a source, to Atzilus. Then we have to explain that Atzilus connects back to the mind of the artist. It's not what you see on the canvas, it's in the mind. And then you connect that mind all the way to the infinite possibilities and all the way back to the source that of the divine source. That's not even an artist, because he's not defined by being an artist. But we can't relate to that without first going through the artist level, because we are part of that so-called track of energy that is expressing. I'm saying it as artist. You could use musician if you wish. You could use an author of a book. It's just an example. But it's clearly one form of creative energy that takes on all these different shapes. So this is more on the macrocosmic level. How is it on the microcosmic level? We do it through Midas, is the structure. Moichin leads us into understanding this artist, and all the way into Kesser, into the artist himself and his 10 spheres as it's in his mind, or not even a mind, but in his being, if you wish, all the way to the infinite spheres, and all the way back to the source, where he's beyond spheres altogether, and so on. And this is the key. This is the way we retrace the steps. So you could think of really of the whole cosmic order, Seder Shtalshus, simply as what do we call them? Not building blocks. What do I say? Like stepping stones. Stepping stones. So here's a big river. How do you get from here to here? So you have stepping stones. Miss one stone, and you miss a link. Like rungs on a ladder, if another way to put it. You can't miss a rung. I mean, you could miss it, you could jump a rung, but if you want it to be fully integrated and fully connected, you have to climb. And the classic example is always teacher and student. And we all have this. All of us began, there's no one on this earth and no one at this table that didn't begin with Aleph Beis, A, B, C. When you were taught A in third grade, in first grade, we were writing A. You had no clue what this A means. You never knew that A is going to be part of a word, and word is going to be part of sentences that will become part of phrases. And now we're all these adults communicating and so on. It has to be a miracle when you think about it. So these A's they were stepping stones. Had you not been taught A, B, C, or Aleph Beis, you wouldn't be able to compose a sentence, wouldn't be able to communicate. Doesn't mean we wouldn't have minds and hearts, but there would be a lack of connection. And then what happens is that the teacher who taught you Aleph, like the Rebbe would often say by Farbrengen from the Friedrich Rebbe, that the Aleph is the Aleph of Anoichi, and Anoichi kail all the Aseret Adibris. Aseret Adibris encompasses the whole Torah, Torah Shebiksav, and the whole Torah Shebal Peh, and everything. All in one Aleph. Had the teacher, who didn't know what that Aleph represents, not had the tzimtzum of giving you just an Aleph, you would never have been able to travel. And then it begins a process. So you begin with a very raw and untamed, immature container, or let's call it recipient, student, child, and you build rungs. And the better the education, those rungs are switches, essentially, like I said, interfaces, stepping stones, to a point where you can connect and you can become, Chassidus says, not only the mind of your teacher, even greater, you can surpass the mind of your teacher. But it was all planted in the original, embedded in those steps.
So because he was choosing it. If he wanted, he would do it in a different
If he did it in a different way and he didn't choose it this way, then we would never be able to relate to the process. Of course, God, if you eliminate all this, then we are basically slaves, puppets, or slaves in a world that we cannot connect from our end. He wants us to connect, not him to connect. So I say this every time, but I'll say it again. God does not need any of this, but there's no relationship without this. Now, could he have done the whole thing differently and without a relationship? Of course he could have, but this is how he chose to do it, and we'll never understand why. But once he did choose it, it makes total sense. Remember, God created logic, so any logic is based on God's will too. But clearly, the fact that he created logic and created a rational system that we can talk about, it tells you that that's part of God's plan, and it's part of the plan of Atzmus. So though he's not logic, but he created logic, so logic is his choice. It means it's somewhat of a reflection of the way the divine works. And one second. And so therefore, but ultimately it does come down to absolutely wanting to have a full relationship. I've mentioned this many times. The proofs of it are very clear. In the Torah just gave us mitzvahs that are action-oriented, like put on film, keep Shabbos, eat kosher, bring a korban, etc. Then you can argue that we are servants serving a master. But there's mitzvahs are know me, feel me, love me. As soon as you have mitzvahs like that, you change the whole equation. That means there's a relationship. A servant doesn't have to know his master. A servant doesn't have to love his master. As soon as you have a mitzvah, v'ahavta, v'yadaita, da, then you're dealing with a whole new world. Then you're dealing with becoming a relationship. And then there's the words that we're not God's just servant, we're God's child, we're God's partner, and so on. But that to me is a given before we even begin. That's like an axiom. But once you know that, I just want to finish one point, and then this is more of an overview of the entire thing. So, okay, you know what? Before I did finish, I believe, and then I'll go now where a summary of which chapter we're at, because now this chapter in this context comes to begins actually a new chapter in this whole drama saga.
Is the ultimate goal, like times the Gula, Shlema, is it to realign ourselves with God in Atzilus, where there's a creator and we exist as the Seros, there's an infinite being, which is the interface between the Kalim and the Oros? Or are we trying to even go higher to Bleakpool, to Kesser, where then the question becomes, how do we align ourselves if in Kesser there's infinite possibilities, there's no uniqueness, no identity, so then what are we aligning with? Who are we if there's only godliness there?
I'm going to answer in a roundabout way, but I'll get back to it in a moment. My inclination is to challenge your whole entire premise of your question, but I'm not going to do that this time. No, I'll tell you why. Because the premise you're speaking very much almost like the material way of speaking about these things. Like, when do we get the prize, and what's the higher prize? It's like the thermometer going up type of thing. So I understand where you're coming from, but I want to just say a few things. I want to say this. There's an expression, it's a very important point here. There's a seemingly contradiction. The contradiction goes like this. Talmidei Chacham or Tzadikim ein lahem menucha, le b'olam hazeh v'le b'olam haba. They have no peace, not in this world, not in the world to come. And then we have a clear statement that when Mashiach comes, Shabbos, which is Elam Haba, will be Yom Shekulei Shabbos or Menucha. In the same word. Ein la menucha or Yom Shekulei Menucha. So, how do we explain that? Some explain it's 2 stages, but it says it seemingly in the same period of time. So I think the Maharsha may say it at the end of Tamid, one of these places, one of the ends of Masechtas, and maybe, and the Rebbe definitely brings it, a very fascinating answer. It's very simple, but brilliant. He says that when Mashiach comes, we will have menucha from having no menucha. Understand? Now, it's a counterintuitive response because most of us think of menucha and not menucha as contradictions. Either I'm at peace or I'm anxious. But not menucha doesn't always mean anxious. Not menucha could be that you have a healthy angst and a healthy hunger, because Ein Sof Elikus is Ein Sof, and you never will stop. Now, for most of us, that's a very almost disturbing statement. Most people want to know that it's going to stop at some point, that we're going to retire, the battle is over, and we're going to be able to just hang out. But for a tzaddik and a Talmid Chacham, that's not an aspiration. Yes, we want tzaras to stop. We want problems to stop, and anxiety, and daigas parnos, that for sure. But we don't want the journey to stop. So in Tanya, in Agersa Kedesh, when he asks this question, he says, so what will we be doing when Mashiach comes? Once already all the Birurim are finished, there's no battle left. What are we going to do? So he says that, and what are we going to learn Torah for? Halacha. All these halachas. What Issa v'Heter won't be relevant. There won't be anything that's forbidden, because it will be eliminated. So all we do, so he says, the learning of Torah and the mitzvahs will be aliyas aden ketz. Torah will be only to have a continuing aliyas. Now for us that's a hard concept, because we are so busy with the battle between good and evil. That's for us the motivator, so to speak, and the thing that moves us. It's hard for us to understand, how will I be motivated if I don't have an enemy? But if you remember, if you're a tzaddik or Talmid Chacham, and all of us will be that when Mashiach comes, the enemy of good will be, of excellent will be good. Today they say it's the opposite, But the enemy of good, excellent, will be good, which means that you will have the same drive to go from good to better, because you'll be in touch with Ein Sof. So that's the general answer. Even when you reach Atzilus, it's not like you reach a place and that's it. Atzilus itself is constantly looking to go into Keser and higher. So you'll have this constant flow of a structure constantly aligning to higher and more infinite spaces, endless. Now, it's hard for us to imagine such an endless journey. But when you're aligned to with Ein Sof, it is an endless journey. So my answer to you is that it's always correct. The whole Seder Shtalshelus will still exist, but it will be continuously, let's put it this way, the channel will be open between an Atzmus that's beyond anything, to an Atzmus that is an artist with infinite possibilities, to an Atzmus that is manifest in one possibility, all the way into Atzilus, and all that channel will be open. So the structure and beyond structure will constantly be flowing, and it's just a matter of how much work you do. That's why it says when Mashiach comes, we're not going to all be equal. It says, Kulim yedu esi, person will not teach another. No one will ever teach anyone. But then it continues, it says, everyone will know me, God. But from young to old. So what is going on? The answer is because the structure will remain, but they'll all be connected to AC, each in our own way. There will be difference between people. It's not like we're all going to be on the same level. But then the challenge will be simply from good to better, to better, to better, endlessly. It's hard for us to imagine, but that's the response to your question.
No biyah.
Huh?
No biyah.
No biyah.
Why not? Why not biyah too? Biyah is not a bad world. It's only bad when we misunderstand its purpose. Chassidus says later in Ayin Beis he's going to speak that even the Tzimtzum Harishan will be, but it'll be Tzimtzum Atzmei Yoyer. That's the expression, that the Tzimtzum itself will illuminate. So let's put it this way: a father hides from his child in order to elicit the ingenuity of the child to find the father. What can happen is two scenarios. The child gives up looking, right, and goes off on his own. That's the Tzimtzum Gan Orai, and then it can go off and all kinds of trouble happens. Which is essentially the story of all history. Or the child keeps looking and he finds the father. At the same time, the concealment becomes part of the process, because the concealment was only there to bring out more energy. So you can see concealment as a source of problems. You can also see concealment as a source of growth. So when Mashiach comes, there'll be resistance. It just won't be resistance of evil. Destruction won't exist. The Rambam says, he says there won't be destruction. But he says, what is Das Hashem Bavad? That's an endless journey. That doesn't stop. It's hard for material creatures like us to relate to it. To have no daigas parnasa, you don't have to worry, so you have to go to work. You have no health issues, you have no death issues, you have no lawsuits and litigation, and all you got to do is know God. So for many of us, it sounds pretty boring, actually. It's geschmack today to learn a little chassidus, because when you're going into a world that's not full of that. But when everything is going well, like everyone says, everyone talks about heaven and Gan Eden as being a very boring place. Like they always say, I want hell for the company and heaven for the climate. Because exciting.
More interesting character.
Right. That's where it's spicier. It's more lebedik. Yeah. But the beauty of this is that when you actually, I'll tell you the story that I once shared. I don't know if I shared it here. I once spoke for a medical conference I mean, it's all doctors, but they invited me to speak about health of the future. You know, the Jewish view on health of the future. So I spoke the Rambam, I spoke the whole thing that there will be no longer disease and illness and death and so on. But I explained why, like we're discussing now. Because why should a body not be healthy? If a soul has infinite amount of power, it doesn't run out of power. The soul, it's not like physical electricity. Even that has, you can say, pretty not unlimited. But so why would a body and a soul not be able to live forever together? The answer is because the body is punctured. The body is a machine that wears down, and it's the different organs and stuff erodes, ages, etc. The beginning of the Torah, it says that had Adam and Chava not eaten from the tree of knowledge, they would have lived forever. It's not a miracle. It's actually death is the aberration. Why would a soul and a body not be aligned? Think about it. A body created by God, a soul that's a divine energy, what's stopping it? So the only answer is think of it like a cup and water, that if there was no evaporation, an intact container should hold liquid in it forever. You know, I'm talking about subject to outside forces and so on. But only answer is if the container is punctured, physically or in any other way. And then the energy cannot. And that's what happens to us. Our body begins to get punctured or worn down. Mashiach comes, Chis HaMesim is essentially the realignment. So I discussed this at length, the health of the universe. What does health mean? Anyway, at the end of it, one guy got up, a doctor got up and said, okay, very nice. Beautifully put, because I explained it logically. I didn't explain it wasn't like you have to believe in Chis HaMesim. I said, so it's going to go back to the healthy state of affairs, of how it should be. And obviously, some people asked, how can this earth hold billions and trillions of people if no one dies? But that's another discussion. But so a doctor got up and asked me, so what will we do as doctors? What will we doctors be doing? Great question. So knowing that Geras HaKodesh and knowing similar ideas, I said basically after, of course, the prerequisite joke that's why they charge so much today to save for a long retirement. Not that we'll need money then, but you know. So what I said was very simple. What doctors will be doing, and it was a very interesting reaction that came. This was secular doctors. I mean, there were some religious, but mostly secular. I said doctors will be doing the most beautiful thing of all. Instead of fighting disease and illness and pain and the death and all that comes with it, you'll be, because you have intimate knowledge of human physiology and biology and chemistry and neurology and so on, you'll be teaching the rest of the world the secrets of the divine that we learn from this beautiful art that God created. Mipsari echzelaka, from my flesh I behold God. Every detail of the human being and all the mysteries, and that still today are far from conquered. With all that we know, you'll be teaching us those secrets. And the same thing, astronomers will be doing it with their knowledge, and scientists and physics in their way, and everyone in their own way. I'll tell you what happened next. It was interesting. I mean, I explained a little more. I got a standing ovation from all the doctors. Yeah, they do, because they never heard it quite that way. And the truth is, I got the idea from the Rebbe in a completely different context. I shared this with you once, I think. It's not so much Ayin Beis related, but since we're Fabring, okay, fine. You know, why not? It's Arum, the Chassidus, Medet Arum. So, the story of the laundromat, I shared this here? Huh? I didn't start it? Or yeah. It's unbelievable Igeris from the Rebbe. It's like such a brilliant, but it's also a lesson in understanding how to. So the Rebbe writes a letter to, of all people, a laundromat. Or it's in Igris Kodesh somewhere. I mean, there's all kinds of gems like that in Igris. So the Rebbe writes a letter to a guy who owns a laundromat. And what would the Rebbe write to a laundromat guy? Besides, a bracha and so on. So the Rebbe says everything is Hashgacha Pratis, right? So everything is Hashgacha Pratis. So the Rebbe writes that since your work can teach us lessons in Avodas Hashem, so the Rebbe shares one of them. He says like this: what's the chiddush of laundry? You buy garments and you wear them once, a new garment, twice, 3 times, 4 times, a few times. Starts getting soiled, wrinkled, dirty. Okay, how much longer can you wear a garment? You can't, so you have to throw it out. No, comes laundry and says no. You give it to a laundromat and they take the garment and they the first thing is put it into water. And not just regular water, warm water. And mix chemicals into it to get rid of stains and different smudges, grime and so on. Then afterwards it dries and you put it under a very heavy press. And then, fresh. And you can do this process many times over the lifetime of the garment. The Rebbe said the same thing is neshama shenasata bi tahirihi. Everybody gets a pure soul. Life breaks everybody. Life does its thing. It wears you down, soils, grime, this thing, that thing, wrinkles. You think, okay, it's a downward spiral. No, the Eibishter says, here's the way you can revive, re-energize. You take the neshama and you submerge it in water. Mayim elateira. But not just plain water, warm water. That's chayis, warm water. Chmimus, varmkeit, warmth. It's a warm heart. And then you mix chemicals. There's mezuzah, tefillin, tzedakah, Shabbos. Each chemical washes out different type of grime and the different. You could look it up yourself. The Neshama and the Guf, they're working together here. And then you take it out and you put it under a Kabbalah oil, a press, a heavy press, recognizing that you're a messenger of something higher than you are. That gives you this type of responsibility, and you have a fresh neshama tahirihi. So besides the beautiful lesson, I thought to myself, so that's the key. Each of us has our own skills. And Mashiach comes, instead of using your skills just to make money, and to take care of your needs, and just to make a parnasa and bring whatever you need home, you'll be using your skills to leidas Hashem b'lvad. That's what it means. It doesn't mean everyone's going to become a theologian. It doesn't say that anywhere. Molar is Deis Hashem, leidas Hashem. Everyone through there, b'chol drachecha da'eyu, in the full sense of the word. Imagine all day, whatever your particular strengths are, you'll be able to see the divine or reveal the divine in your unique way. That's what I shared with the doctor. So, you talk about Mashiach, from my perspective, this is how we should be talking about Mashiach and learning it, because it's the only way to make people feel they can relate it. Without this, you tell me, what are we exactly going to be doing then? So, this is somewhat a little on a tangent, but let's go back to the chapter, okay?
What the doctors will be doing in the future.
Okay, empowering health. Okay. It's not a contradiction to what I said, right?
It's what you're saying.
Okay. So we go to this chapter?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So we are in chapter Kuf Nun Ches 158 with a question down the table that we're in the middle of. And in the middle of the question, we've gone on to all kinds of different interesting, I can't call it tangents, but side points, I guess, to build the case. So I'm not going to read it from the beginning again. I'm going to just say like this. But I'll just read the first line. So going back to what I said. So we have two tracks. One is the track of, we'll call it the Kav Hamida. Kav Hamida. Kav Hamida means literally what we call the ruler, the yardstick. Kav Hamida is like a line that measures. We'll soon learn that there's two ways to measure things, but a Kav Hamida is usually like some type of rod that's used to measure. This is also in the olden days. Kav Hamida. And then this Kav Hamida is the gauge that doesn't just measure but controls the flow of energy into existence. So think of it as the paintbrush that God uses that regulates the flow. But we said the Ovis, however, they brought in an energy that's beyond the Kav Hamida. It says L'mayla Kav Hamida. Right?
The source of the Kav Hamida.
Shaloi al pi maimer Kav Hamida. No, it says Shaloi al pi maimer Kav Hamida. That's why there's a question. So not according to the maimer of the Kav Hamida, meaning beyond it. Yes, it is from the source, but it's beyond it. And for sure, Matan Torah is that. That's the presenting question. Everything that flows into existence is all according to this, is all through this stylus, you can say, through this channel. So how can you say, and he goes and makes a whole case, I'm not going to read all that because we've reviewed it a few times, how everything in existence is based on medida, even mitzvahs, even Torah. Everything has a structure, everything has measure. Every mitzvah has its parameters. So even, in other words, not just, you could say, okay, the structure of existence is fine, is defined, but even the Giluyim, even the revelations that come into existence are all, and even Makifim are all according to, through this channel. So he says on top of the next page, Vim kein eich nemer da amshachah de bris heilem al pikama kavamid da amshachah da avis ein al pikavamid v'kol shkein amshachah de teira she'ein al pikavamid. How can you say that it's all that they're not according? They don't go according to the regular channeling flow. Since every transmission has parameters, how could it be that it's not according to that? It's not. Could you say it's not according to the Kav Hamida? So of course you could ask the simple question: why did the Rebbe Rashab say in the first place that's not according to the Kav Hamida? He could have said it is, but the fact is it isn't. So the question is how that works. So to explain that begins a long discussion, which again has within it a subplot and a subplot that we got in the middle of. The pasuk in Yecheskel. That's where the source is, one of the sources for the idea of measurement. So now I did a little more research, I can give you a little more background. So it's actually talking about Gavriel, the Malach. And Yecheskel has a vision. The vision is going to be the vision of the Beis HaMikdash and how the Beis HaMikdash is built. Primarily the Beis Bayis Shlishi. So the pasuk goes like this: V'hine ish mareyo mara necheshes. And here, behold, is a person. This ish is Gavriel. That appears the color of copper color. And in his hand, upsil pishton biyodei v'knei hamida. And in his hand is a psil pishton, is like a rope made out of flax, and also a knei hamida, a rod, a reed, you can say. It's basically two measuring tools. And then he continues in Yecheskel talking about how he defines the measure of the Beis HaMikdash. And he goes into all the details. That's the pasuk. Then he says, so we see here two types of ways of measuring. I should have added one thing. Before he goes to the pasuk, he says that there's clearly, everything does come through Medida, but in the Kav HaMidi, yes, Kam Madregas. In other words, what we're doing now is dissecting this paintbrush. This channel itself, there's levels in it, which will help us understand how can something. So if the brush was just a simple one-dimensional brush, you could say, it's a narrow, limited flow, and that's that. But if you can now expand the boundaries of the brush itself, of the channel itself, and say there's levels in it, it'll be a lot easier to understand how the ovis comes through the kav, but it doesn't come through the kav. In other words, basically, it looks like he's leading to that it's going through the channel, but it's coming from another place that's beyond the channel, and therefore the channel itself has several dimensions, which is yet another switch in the interface. So the channel itself is now being addressed. Kav Hamida. So this is the pasuk. Okay. So he brings some Zohar now. That Pasha B'Kudei, that there's two types of the Zohar elaborates on this pasuk, and B'Yuri HaZohar from the Mittler Rebbe or from the Alter Rebbe Tovkuf Samaches. The Alter Rebbe said a whole mimer on the Zohar, and it's printed, and Ayin Beis is very much based on it, and with additions and so on. So he says there's two types of measurements: Zimnin Kav Hamida v'Zimnin Knei Hamida. And that's psil v'knei, v'kona. So in other words, there are times that a measurement is called this, and sometimes there's two types of way of measuring. And the Rebbe Rashab continues the differences between chesed and gvura. And briefly, is like this. All limitations and all regulation of flow is a gvura-dika thing. That's what gvura does. Gvura is the brakes. It measures things. Din, it's like mishkal. It measures, it weighs. Chesed, if you could say, is the flow. Who regulates the flow? Gvura. So chesed and gvura work together in that way. Okay, so what is the difference then? So I did my research on that too. And I must say, not saying to toot my horn, but I didn't say it out of my hat. There's there's three interpretations of Putzin de Kardanissa. One is what you mentioned, from the Chit de Kardanissa, Kardanisa from the word chitin, in Psachim. Yeah. As a matter of fact, there's a whole Pirush in Zayah right here. It's open, where he brings all interpretations. So Butzina means actually a nitzutz chazak, a nitzutz er, a light, a nitzutz, a spark of light. And Kardanisa has one interpretation, hard, from the word like tough and hard. So it's like a strong light, strong. But Kardanisa, some say the girs is Kadranisa. And it's that, the Kadrus v'cheshach. That's actually the primary interpretation. The Alter Rebbe uses that interpretation in Torah Eir and in other places. But even he still writes Kardanisa, but they still say it's the Butzin of the Kardanisa, it's the light in the darkness. That's what they call it.
You connect it to Chitim, the first Pirush. The light comes from Chitim?
No, just the Kardanisa is like Chitim the Kardanisa. Not the Chitim are not related. The word comes from like the word in the Gemara. That the hard Chitim, that they were harder than regular, than usual. And actually, so the bottom line is, Butzin the Kardanisa is a level called, it is essentially this level that is the light, but it's the regulation of the light. It's not the light itself. You could reconcile the two interpretations, the dark and the strong. Because here it doesn't mean strong as in a, where does he say it? Where did I see that? Oh, actually in Bir Azer, he says that there's two ways of talking about Gvura. Gvura can be as a limitation, control, withholding. Sometimes Gvura tzimtzum, but sometimes Gvura is tagbura sachayis, an overflow, an intensity of energy. And the Alter Rebbe reconciles. He says it's a contradiction. He says that in order to withhold, you need to have a overpowering. So it's not, you need to have more power to withhold than not to withhold. That's how he explains it. So, for example, when you see a dam that's holding back the water, the dam is Gvura, but it's a Gvura that has in it a lot more intensity than even the water. That's why it could hold it back. And once you let's say the dam builds up an energy that would not build up without it. That's what he basically says. So it's really a contradiction. So that's the strength of Butzin the Kardanisa is essentially the power to regulate energy. That's really what it is. Or you can say the energy as it has to be measured as it enters a place that's darker. But regardless, this is the level of Kav Hamida. This is Kav Hamida. Now, I was looking up, that's what I meant in Tzemach Tzedek. Is this Kav Hamida the same Kav that we've been talking about? Kav Chut, that comes after the Tzimtzum. So Tzemach Tzedek has a whole discussion about that. He says in some places it appears yes, in some places it appears not. That the Kav Hamida is not necessarily the Kav, but it's interesting where the Rebbe Rashab is going to go. But it's also a regulator. It's a narrow air. So is that because some places Butzin the Kardanisa appears is lower than the Kav, some places appears it's part of the Kav. But the Rebbe Rashab, we haven't yet concluded the subject, so I'm not sure where he's going to go with this. Okay. Then there's a thing called Knei Hamida. So that's Gvura. Knei Hamida, on the other hand, is a chesed type of measurement. What's Knei Hamida? So the word Knei is kinim, like the reeds. They grow primarily on the water. Like he brings the proofs for it. Water is chesed.
Kana v'suv kamelo.
Yeah, right.
The reeds grow
by the water. Yeah, kana v'suv kamelo, and the second one, ukame kasher yonut hakana b'mayim. So water and reeds. Water is chesed. Pishtan, on the other hand, what we said, Kav Hamida, which is Pishtan, the first thing that was in his hand, in Gavriel, the man's hand, was Kav. That's Pishtan, that's flax. And flax grows from the earth, and the earth is Gvura. That's why it grows separately. So in many vegetation, what you have is that you have many seeds on one stalk, and here with flax, every stalk is its own particular seed. So that is Gvura. That is Gvura. Okay. So he didn't explain further what the meaning of chesed and measurement is, but he just established that there's one is a measurement that's connected to Gvura and withholding, and one is a measurement that's connected with chesed and a flow. So we haven't yet gotten to what the difference between the two is. Well, there's just no kav hamida and knei hamida.
Middle.
Huh?
If it's chesed, middle, war.
He says not that. He says kav hamida is gvura and knei hamida is chesed.
But the word middle is measurement.
So there's a measurement from chesed. That's what he's saying.
Okay.
Clearly, there's two things that it says in Zohar. It's two different types of measurement. He didn't conclude the subject. But in the process now begins a whole discussion of what this measurement is like. That's where we're in the middle of the avodah of it. So this is, like I said, a lot of subplots within subplots. It's just a flow. So he began to say, "Inyan hu dinikav amidu shenesin midu v'kitzva al tzilus asfiras." Again, I'm just going to summarize because we learned it inside. The kav hamida creates the parameters for all the spheres. What does this simply mean? That if the spheres did not have a control regulator, they would not allow for the next sphere to emanate. If Kesser just went endlessly, Chochmah would never be able to emerge. That's what he says. That's the example he gives. What does it mean in human terms? He gives an example. Kesser is Ratzon. When a person is a very strong-willed person, there's no room for Seichel. As a matter of fact, he's not even capable of hearing Seichel. That's what he says here. Because he's completely consumed by his will. So strong will, which is Ratzon, doesn't allow for Seichel. You have to regulate the will, or somewhat subside it, diminish it, stop it, in order for Seichel to be able to be there. And you see this all the time, both for good and for bad. If someone is extremely strong-willed, he says a Baal Ritzainus, someone who's dominated by their wills and desires, Seichel doesn't really work there. So now, and this is where we're in the middle of, now he's explaining this idea in Avodah. So all this is all explanation in the Medida, in measurement in Avodah. And here's where we were in the middle of. So what's in Avodah? The story is like this. So let me sum it up. And this is quite complicated. So let's see if we can make any heads and tails. So chenu ba'aveda. He starts chenu n'aveda. What's n'aveda? The kasharotnu bizgalos dainu b'chinas rusa deliba ene shaychaz l'sichli. Rotzen n'aveda he's teaching as being means ru'usa deliba. So let's interpret that. Ru'usa deliba means literally ru'usa is rotzen of the heart. That the soul, the divine soul, has a natural desire in its heart, in the emotion, to connect to God. It's not based on seichel. It's based on its personality. It's based on its muhus, on its identity as such. So that rotzen has nothing. Is not shaykh oz l'sichli. When a person's rusa deliba is awake, it's nothing to do with seichel. Like the Rebbe once said about faith. Similarly, that amunah is something that an answer doesn't make stronger, and a question doesn't make weaker. Seichel doesn't apply to a place where a person has a natural inclination. So not in Kedusha, we know this very clearly. When a person is obstinate or they suddenly get consumed or completely obsessed with some desire, Seichel completely falls on the wayside. And people, even while they're doing it, may know that this is destructive and it still doesn't make a difference. In Kedusha L'Havdil, it's also so. Rusa Deliba is a connection that one has to something, in this case to God, that's just natural, and when that's revealed, Seichel makes no difference. Someone will come and tell you, Seichel, what difference does it make? That's my connection, that's what I want. In this case, it's the wanting of the heart to connect to God. Is it connected to Mesiras Nefesh a bit, but it's not Mesiras Nefesh, it doesn't call it that. It's Rusa, but it's considered to be a faculty of a divine neshama, it has that. In Tanya, it calls you Ava Meshuteres, there's concealed Ava, there's different levels of Ava, but basically it's Rusa Deliba is a particular level. I'm going to go through all the levels of that's in the heart, but it's one of those levels. So, Ene Shayach L'Sichli. That's point number one. What does it mean regarding what he's saying? In other words, when Rusa Deliba is not limited, Seichel will not emerge. When Kesser is not going to have Kav Amida, if we wouldn't have a Kav Amida within regulating ourselves, Seichel would have no role. And the Eibishter does want Seichel. So Rusa Deliba is as powerful as it is. You need to also sit down and be able to learn, so it has to be also subsided at times. You can't just be 24/7 in that state of ecstasy. It's not the kavanah. I'm not even talking about Nadav and Avihu, because you may expire, because it's not the kavanah. There's also there's other things to do. It says, Harba Osuk Rashbi v'lo also be Adam. Not everyone can reach that level. That's Terasib Nase, but the similar idea. Okay. Now he goes on. I'm going slowly because remember when we went through this, it became very. The Rus Lib is soon going to become a whole pasha here. So that's so simple. The Liyah Sharus Lib who lamayla mahasoge. Ma'adas rather, al kain bizgal b'chinas Rus Lib and shaychos l'seichel v'izbonus. Because Rus Lib is lamayla mahadas. It's not based on das. It's not that you set your mind to something and you came to understand it's good, and now you're there. It's not that way. It's a natural inclination. It would be like the example of being a natural love of a parent to a child, or for a child to a parent. Nothing to do with das. That's why you could have a situation, Achman al-Islam, that a parent can be a horrible person, but a child cannot just dismiss the parent. That's what causes a lot of damage, actually, because the love is always there, even if it's something that's not appropriate, because das doesn't make a difference. It's that type of connection. It's like it's matas haseichel ahava in that sense. Obviously, he's talking in the positive way. Then he adds something. There's another level of Rus Liba. Which clearly indicates that there's Rus Liba that does not come through his bonus. So it's just a Rus Liba that emerges. I'm not sure how, but maybe it's something like Yom Kippur. When the nitzutz gets close to the source, it just emerges. A person just cries for no reason. But then there's a Rus Liba that is somewhat controlled through his bonus. So you could think, okay, Rus Liba, that's just natural. That Seichel doesn't speak to it. But what about a Rus Liba that comes through a contemplation? There, he's going to say no. That the contemplation is the catalyst. But once you get into the Rus Liba state, Seichel again has no value.
Are they equal in the state of Rus Liba, whether the catalyst is the plainness or it's a natural Rus Liba? Once you reach the point of Rus Liba, it's the same thing? Where it's beyond limitation?
This is what he's addressing in the next page. This is exactly what he's discussing. We're not sure yet because we're in the middle of it. We'll soon see. Not sure. You could also say it's the same Rus Liba, one that just comes from Omaila and the other one that comes through his bonus. I'm not even sure if it's two levels. But right now, it seems like there's two types of Rus Libas. There's definitely two ways that it emerges. Whether it's two levels of Rus Liba or it's two types, I'm not sure, honestly. Yeah, but you could say it's the same thing. It's like God awakening your soul or you awakening your soul.
No, but he's saying in one, the meters are disappearing. In one, they could be together.
We're not there yet. I'm just reviewing it now. I'm going a lot more meticulously because I don't want to make a mistake here. Because I remember we learned it quickly, and I'm just going slowly, reviewing. I'm not going to learn every line, I'm just going through it. And the contrary, if you see something the different way, but by all means. Okay. So now goes a statement of explaining how could it be through his bonus. If it's coming through his bonus, then seemingly, then Rus Liba and Seichel should communicate to each other. One is a catalyst for the other, one is leading to the other. Which really would mean that it doesn't really belong in the. Then really it's not a good example for our discussion. We're trying to say that without the Kav Amida and the regulator, if Kesser is not limited, if Kesser keeps flowing, Ratzon keeps flowing, then the Chachma can't emerge. He's saying here that it could. You see, it comes from his bonus. So who says you can't have the two of them together? Basically, Kesser and Chachma. Why do you need a Kav Amida? Essentially, I'm just spelling it out. He's not asking that question, but that's implied in. So he says no. So he says like this, as it's known that even Rus Liba that comes the awakening through a contemplation, and what is the contemplation? Atzmus Ein Sof, in the grandeur and the exaltation of the infinite divine light. That awakens it. So that comes clearly through a contemplation, and we learned this before in chapter 151. Right, 150 or 151? 150, I think. Yeah, 150. Nevertheless, so it comes clearly through contemplation. You contemplate. On your own, you're, let's say, in a regular place. You sit down, you start being mizbeinin, so it's clearly coming from your contemplation. When you're coming to comprehend and understand and contemplate on that Atzmus, the grandeur of Atzmus beyond beyond this all.
Isn't that the difference between the two rules in the Levis? One comes through the contemplation of the grandeur, and one comes through the contemplation of a lesser degree of godliness. You know?
Did he say that in chapter 150? You're saying, Tom, your own.
I'm saying something because I'm thinking, I see here some words of these, he keeps on repeating the importance of that flow they didn't say.
Well,
That's
exactly correct. He's speaking out Rusli coming through his bonus, and the other one doesn't come through his bonus.
But what type of his bonus? That's, I think, might be the difference.
I don't know. No. I wouldn't go there. No, he didn't say that. That's saying.
He's saying it in the next line. What type of
That's. But this is not the Rusli. This is the Rusli that comes through his bonus. Not the, and even that's where he's going now. I would not jump and say that. I think that what you're saying now is, I think, wrong, actually. So Adam said, that comes through comprehension. What does that mean? That at the beginning, he first comprehends the Giluyim. First, he comprehends the revelations of the divine. That means how we relate to them. As we learned back in that chapter, 150. And from there he comes to understand that God is beyond these revelations. So not just that God is giving you life, God's sustaining existence, but we come to understand that God is beyond the sustenance of existence. So that causes him to get excited. He's fall in a state of Rusa, so he wants to be part of that. So this clearly is coming through Hasaga. He says no. Once he gets excited, then it's no longer connected to the seichel. It was the catalyst. What brought him to there was us understanding the grandeur. But once he's awakened, that was just, so to speak, the means. Now he's in a place that's again beyond seichel. Again, the ima yesh zabai de asaga makom makom lachas shemasig as a geluim body de asaga v'hegers da floor the ensef shayzen is Paul berus libe in the be'esay spouse berus libe never that's le hegers sichli. So even though it came from that place, but he lost when he reaches the place of the feeling of that desire of the heart, he loses the hegers sichli. It no longer is part of the picture. Hagam, again he says, Hagam shemezeh boizman mekom mokom never haragas sichli v'eru b'yispayla shalamal metamadas. I'm not sure what this line adds. It seems almost like a repeat of the previous line. But okay, he says it again, clearly to drive the point home. And he's now in a state of excitement that's lamayla metamadas. In other words, the tamvadas was not the creator of Rusad Liba. It was the catalyst. It was there. It awakened it. Once it's awake, now it's back. Now it's in a place that's beyond seichel. So it's not it's not. There are things that sometimes the cause of something, even afterwards, remains a part of it. But sometimes a cause, you could have a catalyst, and now the power that it elicits is far more powerful than what sparked it or ignited it. So bottom line is, Rusa Deliba, either way you go, whether it's a Rusa Deliba without his bonus or with his bonus, it's not sichli once you're there.
What's the term hergish and sichli? What's that adding? Hergish and only midas.
Because based on his bonus brings you to a feeling. We learned this, the meaning that when you think about it, then you start hergish sichli. The seichel senses something beyond, and that leads you to a Rusa Deliba. It's in chapter 150. It talked about the seichel is the hergish seichel. If I recall, that was the difference between the sog and his bonus. I believe one was the midah. His bonus was with the midah. And the other was only the hasag itself. But you could have contemplation more academic.
Right.
You know God's grandeur. And that's it. You can go to sleep afterwards also. It doesn't mean it's going to do anything. But then there's a grandeur that really it captivates you. So first it captivates your mind, emotionally, like the emotions in your mind, and then it captivates, then it gets the Rusa Deliba ignited. Yeah, the Rusa Deliba clearly is not a component of Seichel, that's for sure. It's basically it's like the heart, deep in our unconscious, a neshama, a soul, a divine soul, has a natural desire. It's the bottom line.
But you said the other it's not midas either.
We're going to say that now. It's not midas. It's Rusa Deliba. It's rotzen. It's keser. It's keser sheba neshama. It's not midas sheba neshama. He's going to distinguish it right now. We're going to say that.
Excitement. It's got the two.
No. Intellectual excitement is the process. It could also be not excited. Rusa Deliba could be dormant.
No, but I'm saying hergish sichli.
Hergish sichli, yeah, you can say that. Intellectual excitement, yeah. Your mind gets excited. Your mind gets engaged. So you could have you could have no mind at all. You could have a mind that's engaged intellectually, and then there's a mind that's engaged, excited. I mean, basically, the mind that's excited will go and act on it. The mind that's engaged or just gets it doesn't necessarily going to act on it. Because, it's a good idea and you move on. It's like a detachment.
That's not a before it.
Yeah.
To say that the use of the ribo is not connected to...
Why would they say here?
If you say that...
He says it clearly.
What do you need the...
What?
Yeah.
You said the use of the ribo is something which is in you, even before you have these godness.
Yeah.
So why can't you bring it out without the
How? How? What are you going to do? You have to do something. By the way, I said that. You could also argue that the Rusa Liba that he's saying here is an outgrowth of his bonus, and it's not necessarily inherent. My understanding of it is that way. I may be wrong with the second Rusa Liba. The first for sure, clearly, because he says it's not Rusa Liba. Rusa Liba sounds to me, Rusa Liba, honestly I didn't do all the full research on Rusa Liba, but it sounds to me that we're talking about Rusa Liba that is inherent. But you could argue that it's also a result, it's not necessarily inherent, but it's not seichel. I think it's inherent for look whether I don't know if the re'usa is inherent, but something is inherent. Because why would a heart desire the divine if it doesn't have any connection to it? So it sounds to me that, but regardless, let's even say it's not inherent. Let's say it's acquired. That through a strong contemplation, you suddenly get your heart desires, instead of desiring food or some other pleasure, you desire God. That once that desire is alive and burning, it's not connected to seichel. It's like what he said before, like the person has a strong ratzon, and seichel doesn't make a difference anymore. It's not, in other words, you come to that person and say, listen, what you're doing is not logical, this connection to God. You got to go to work, or you got to go to sleep. It's going to be irrelevant. He's now excited. He's on a search. His desire is awake. That's the key. So it's not so relevant to inherent. I said it because it makes it a little more, I think, logical. But I don't know if it's so important to say it's inherent. He doesn't say those words. He says Bizgalus Rusa Deliba Oz Ein Shayach Oz Sichli Sichli. Bottom line is, when a person's heart is awakened with a strong desire to the divine, whether it came through his bonus or didn't, that moment seichel has nothing to do with it.
Is that a positive thing? Or
yeah, positive. Yeah, it's a positive. I am assuming because of Kav Hamida that it can't always be in that state. Because if you're in that state, you're not going to go do a mitzvah. You're not going to apply yourself to your family. You can. It's a state of too much rotze.
Yes.
That's why it's positive when it's necessary. It's positive. But remember, the point he wants to make from this is that actually that when that happens, the rest of the seichel doesn't work, and God wants us to use our seichel too.
So that's a negative.
No, it's not negative because there's two stages. When you need to have that, you do this, and then there comes stage two.
Stage two, which is a higher level, which is where you don't have seichel at all. You just feel
no. High seichel says stage two is after the inspiration. You go and learn Torah with your seichel. You go back to the world of seichel.
You go back to lots of a shuv.
There's a whole, we learned it also. And then you go to Hayadvar Ma'el. Okay, now begins the parentheses. Again, we're going slowly. I don't know if any of those who were here Friday know that this was very intricate, so that's why I'm doing this. So far, so good, I think. Now comes a long parentheses with a parentheses within a parentheses, and within a parentheses within a parentheses within a parentheses. I like that. Ready for that? So the truth is, the simplest thing to do is to skip the whole parentheses and just see what he's going to say afterwards. I want to do that for a moment. I'm going to go right back. Just want to see what the flow is.
If you know where it ends, though.
That's another problem. There's a machlekes where the parentheses ends. Some say it ends after volume 3. That would be a problem. No, that's not correct. No.
Go straight to Tafresh Ayin.
By the way, in the second volume of Ayin Beis, there are parentheses that go tens of 30, 40 pages. Because the whole explanation in the Maggid's Torah. That's a hard one. That's a hard cup.
It's a full Maimer parentheses?
Maimer? 50 Maimerim. Maybe 40 Maimerim. Not one parenthesis. He takes one piece of the Maggid, 3 lines, 3 words, and goes pages explaining it.
Did he say
and then another 3 words. And you can find them. They're actually there. He keeps going back to it.
Said it in the Mimer?
He wrote it, and he must have said it.
So how does he say apprentices?
You could say the Maggid Zogt. The Rebbe did it over many times. The Maggid Zogt weiter das. And the beer in them is, that's very easy to do.
Thinking about the parentheses after he said it.
No. Those parentheses were for sure written when he wrote it. Parentheses are not additions that came later. Some may be, but not necessarily.
I saw when the
So where does the parentheses end? What do we decide? It ends down on the bottom. The star, right? So I'm going to skip for a moment because it got so complicated. I just want to see where he's going, so maybe it helps us. Because we've discovered in the past that when you know where the Rebbe Rashab is going, it helps us understand the parentheses. Because the Rebbe, if he's writing the parentheses, he knows what he wants to say afterwards. We don't. So that sometimes.
I saw when the Rebbe Rashab was a child, some tzaddik was holding him, and he said that he will be a Rebbe like my father, the Mittel Rebbe.
Yeah. So I'm skipping the parentheses on the next page, Shin Yud Daled, the star.
Right, start to the line before and then.
Okay, yeah. So the line goes like this.
Line before the parentheses.
Yeah.
After that also parentheses. And
Hagam Shem Ezeh Bo Yisei. I just want to know the line without the parentheses. Hagam Shem Ezeh Bo Mekol Mokim Kasher Meseder Berus Liba Never Da Hergish Sichli Varihu Be Spailu Shalamayel Metam Vedas. So even if it comes from his bonus, once he's in that state of excitement or desire, is lost. The seichel is lost, and he's now in a state of spilus excitement that's higher than tam v'das. He's gotten excited. It would be like somebody, you're let's say you're at home asleep, and there's a great farbrengen going on somewhere. Someone wakes you up, and you say, you come to farbrengen. You say, oh, no, I'm not now. You say, no, it's great, and they start telling you who's there, and they start telling you what's being discussed, and suddenly hey, sounds interesting. And then you come there, and suddenly you become the party animal. So, and now someone says, hey, you got to go home. You say, no, I'm here now. It's great, and that's a good example. So his bonus brought you there, and without it, you wouldn't get there. But once you're there, now you're on fire. So now seichel doesn't make a sense, and then someone says, hey, your wife wants you home or whatever. I'll be there later. So before you wouldn't even want to go. I'm just, trying to make things practical. Maybe Rusad Liba by us today is a nice good verbringen. Okay, that's good. Rak yesh b'zeh hefresh.
Now you stop the flow.
Huh?
Now you stop the flow.
No. The flow, no. So he's now in a state of l'mayel metam b'das. The only thing is, there's a difference. He makes bonus sirak bein haflo deid ein sof. Oh, now there's he making a distinction. Okay, now he is. If there's bonus, the contemplation is only in the haflo of eid ein sof, only in the grandeur of the divine infinite light. Oi, she's bonus hu be'efen hafla. In other words, only in the inyan. I have to understand what that means. The idea of the grandeur, or in the form of its grandeur. Not sure the difference.
Now you're differentiating between one of the Rusad Libas that we're talking about.
I'm not sure what he's differentiating, to be honest. But okay, 1 second. The im to Oz. That's my it's the letters. It's not because of the Oz gamarus liba husichu sichli. Got it. Oh boy. So if it's the Eifanah flaw, in other words, one is he senses that there's a grandeur in the divine, but he doesn't know the details, so-called, of it. He doesn't know the way. We learned this in that chapter. The Eifanah flaw would be how God is beyond us, not just that He is. Like you can come to a process of elimination or through a what's called extrapolation. You can extrapolate that God gives us energy and life. That means that God must be beyond energy and life because He can't be part of us. He's beyond us. Okay.
Contemplation is more of
So contemplation leads you to grandeur, and that's amazing. Wow, God is beyond. But that will only give you, that's a Rusad Liba excitement that has not connected to Seichel. But if your Seichel was also in the Eifen HaFla, you start thinking Atzmus, let's say, is built to Mitzias Nimtza. He's a non-existential existence, or he's an existence that creates that's self-created or self-sustained. Or the different things you start discussing, you're actually understanding this grandeur. Not just that it is grand, not just that it's grandiose, but you understand it. He's saying then that the Rusad Liba Oz Gamar Rus Liba who's Sichli. Then the Rus Liba is also Sichli. Why? I'm not even sure.
He's
But
explaining.
the Hafla is lower.
He's explaining it.
Okay. The Kasher Rus Liba who Masogas Eifan Hafla Haru B'chinas Ava B'tainugim. V'Ava B'tainugim Hem B'chinas Primi. Because once you understand, in other words, Seichel meets beyond Seichel because you're understanding the grandeur of the divine. That's what he's saying. So it's not no longer just Seichel brought you there. I'm trying to find the example where the guy woke you up for the Fabrenim. I don't think it works. Because once you're there, you understand, appreciate what's going on. So you appreciate what's going on.
Next
You
three
internalize
lines.
the
Next three lines.
the experience. You internalize the experience. And
Yeah. Now he says that you internalize because you are understanding it. Okay. Okay. V'hainu kasher hasoga v'hahergish hu ba'efen haflo de'en sof baruch hu haru b'chinas kloyin lisaneg al havaya shezeh b'chinas pnimi. It's basically explaining that when the contemplation and the hergish, the sensation, is in the way God is the Ein Sof, the haflo of it, he's in a state of expiration to the lisaneg al havaya, pleasure in havaya shezeh b'chinas pnimi. Again, what this adds to the line before, I'm not sure. But when the contemplation is only in the inyan of a flow, that he is grandiose, and you don't know the way he is, and from this he gets excited in a desire from his heart, then the excitement is higher than Tambadas, and the seichel is lost. Because the other place, the seichel is not lost. How could you say seichel is lost? While you're excited, your mind is also part of it, because your mind appreciates what you're excited about. Whereas the other one, you just know that he's beyond, and you're excited about it, but you're not so-called completely internalized. So your seichel is not there. Seichel is apart. It was just a place that brought you there. Now, the appreciation with the mind of what you're experiencing allows seichel to be there while the Rus Liba is there. If you don't appreciate what you're experiencing, you still can be in spilus. But you're like standing in a mysterious place. It's like knowing I'm in a awesome place, but it's not internalized. That's the point. Yeah, that's clearly the idea. That seichel, you're appreciating where you are. It's like when Yaakov woke up and realized he was such a place that, doesn't necessarily understand what it is, but he knows there's something awesome
Is it
there.
fair to say one is a level of consciously aware, and the other one is almost like an unconscious state, where he's not, there's no seichel involved?
But it came from seichel. That's why you can't say completely.
Yeah. When he's there, is the moment.
I would say that there is that you're just you're in an awesome place, but you have no idea what kind of place it is. With the other one, you have an understanding of this. You have appreciation.
But didn't we say earlier that when you come to this full place of Azura Shadiliba, that you don't have any hergish of seichel?
That's what he's distinguishing. That's the rak. That's the difference. Then he qualifies that there's one form yes and one form not.
And the form not seems to
is only when you know that it's a grandiose thing, the hafla, but not you don't appreciate it. If you appreciate it, he's saying you do have both. He's qualified. What he said before, he's not qualified. After this parenthesis.
also maybe
One second. Let me just see something. Okay, that comes back to the original one. Okay, it is good. And Mekoshkein, the one that is Be'etzad Etzem, what he said all there in the beginning. Remember, the whole thing began that Usid Liba is not Seichel. Then he said, even the one that comes to his Bonanus, it's also when you come to that place. There's no seichel. Then he qualified and said there's one that there's still seichel there. That's a very high level when you know you appreciate the hafla, the grandeur. But the one that is not appreciating it's in a form without seichel. And for sure, Rus Liba, that has nothing to do with his bonus. That just comes from the etzem. That for sure is not connected to seichel. Yeah, that's what I said before. Right, I actually gave that example. Yeah, I didn't realize. Shemeirim mizgalim, Kamershonim Yekripi says Shemeirim mizgalim oz hamakif mishabenefesh. The ena shaykh oz haveda the meich v'lev k'moy kol hasaga. Kol hashana shayikir hu haveda b'hasaga v'izbonus v'yisedes avir shadei izbonus. So Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur says he made tshuva then it just radiates the makifim of the nefesh that are not no relationship with Avodah and in the mind and the heart, like it is all year round, where the primary Avodah is through contemplation, through comprehension and contemplation, and awakening the love and awe through contemplation. Right. Mashenk b'zman ein Avodah me'er v'lev chal, ki b'chinas ha'makifim b'nefesh, is the makifim of nefesh chai yechida, so they wake up the rus of the liba. That's he concludes the whole thing. So when Ratzon has been revealed, rus of the liba.
So what are we doing with our Makser, all of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? There's no Hasai, we're Lahaydan Hasai.
Okay, now we'll go back to the parentheses.
What?
Okay, this is good that we did this, because at least we have a handle here. The three levels of Rus of the Liba, basically. So now the parentheses, I think, will be a little easier to digest. The question to your answer to the question. Yeah, the question to your answer, I think, is better than the answer to your question. Look, he says in Tanya, guys, okay, there's that everybody has to learn Torah, everybody has to give tzedakah. But they're Mari Torah, there are people who are primary Torah, and there are people who are primary tzedakah, business. Yisachar and Zvulun. So the same thing is, there's no such thing as any time of the year, move the bottle, there's no such thing as any time of the year where that only one Avodah is dominant. It's always, as the Rebbe puts it, Zohar, there's a mitzvah to have a Zohar Beit Tvei. You know what that means? The mitzvah that's your specialty. That's the gate through which everything goes. Especially in Rosh Hashanah, you still put on tefillin Hashem, right? Rosh Hashanah, most of the prayers are similar to Shabbos and other Yom Tov. But there's additional. So definitely it's a special day. But the Korban Tamid was brought every day in the year. Even on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Yeah. So every day we say, that's why you say, why do we say regular prayers on Yom Kippur? Because it wasn't, the Ragat Shavar, the Rebbe brings from the Ragat Shavar, when you have a special quality, let's say a Kohen Gadol is a Kohen and a Kohen Gadol. Does that mean the Kohen in him is regular like all Kohanim, or his Kohen itself also becomes like Kohen Gadol? So that's the question. You could say Yom Kippur, the part of it that's like Shabbos, or the part that's like Yom Tov, is it like Yom Tov, or once it's Yom Kippur, it gets elevated to Yom Kippur? And there are proofs in Halacha that it's the second one. What's the famous raya that in Yom Kippur that is that way? There's a din. Like Big Day Kahuna, I think Big Day Kahuna. The Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur put on special begadim. But I think even as regular begadim were also, there's a few proofs for what I just said. But the bottom line, even if Yom Kippur elevates, but it still has elements that we do every day. So there's no question that Torah mitzvahs, even seichel, there is. But in Yom Kippur, the primary thing in Yom Kippur is not learning shiurim all day. It's davening. So even if you say chitas and so on, it's not you put the same amount of time. Or if you have it, like our Ayin Beis shir is not going to happen Yom Kippur morning. Not only because there's no camera. My point is that the primary avodah of Yom Kippur, like Elul, it says that even people learn the Torah all day, Elul, they mamayed a little Torah to do more tefillah. But not completely. The point I'm making here is there's always overlap in the scholars. There's no such thing as exclusive. They don't do anything except. Everything has everything in it. So that, of course, but he's just saying Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, and Ases Metshuva, there's an awakening because what Chassidus says elsewhere, the nitzutz kiruv hamoyer el nitzutz, the orbit of the soul, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur comes closer, so there's a tug. That's why the Rizal says, Kol mishav ein bech, someone who doesn't cry in Ases Metshuva, the soul is not complete. Why? Not crying intentionally, because inevitably you're going to cry because the source is closer. It's like that type of existential crying because you just sense there's something greater than you. So in Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, these things awaken on their own. That's what he's saying here. On the contrary, the Rebbe always brings about the SesimEtshuva, says, Karu b'yesi karav, Dirsh Hashem b'motzeh, that what you can accomplish with a minyan all year, you can accomplish as a yochid. Right? Kan b'yochid, kan b'tzibur. That you can accomplish, because the Dirshu says Lashon Yochid. So it says that you can accomplish, one person can accomplish in the 10 days of Tshuva what it takes a minyan to do throughout the year. And a minyan on Sesame Tshuva accomplishes even more. So, I'm just answering your question. So bottom line is, yes, I would sum up that there's 3 levels of Rusa Delib. I don't know 3 levels, I'm not sure exactly how to define, but three categories for sure. One is a Rusa Delib that just comes from the Etzem, like Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, it awakens. That's not Shaykh to Seichel. When you have that awakening and excitement, logic makes no difference. Right. That is L'mayla Matan V'das. Right. Then there's one that comes through his Baranus, and that too breaks into two parts. One that comes through a contemplation. Throughout the year, let's say. You're sitting down, regular middle of the day, and you're contemplating on the grandeur. First you start with the Giluyim of God. You see God running the universe. You see God giving you health. You see the beauty of existence. Like the Rambam says, how do you come to love and awe? By being mizbein on the godless. You see greatness of God in this world, not grandeur. Then that brings you to a grandeur, that God is beyond. Wow, this is something awesome. That brings you to an excitement, and it's Rusa Deliba. That Rusa Deliba, once you get there, even though the catalyst was the contemplation, it's L'mayla Matan V'das. And then there's a level of rak, that's what he says after parentheses, that the contemplation is not just that there is such a grandiosity, but that you actually understand it, you appreciate it. Eifen hafla. And there he says, there it also gets internalized, because your mind is understanding where you are. And due to that, it's ava b'tainugim, it's internalized, and there, seichel does meet, so to speak. It's actually very good because it's the interface. Remember, we do want seichel to meet tispilus, but it's a very, very high level. Ava b'tainugim is the highest level of ava. This is like a tzaddik. Now, let's put it this way. Let's say you and the Rebbe were standing, both of you, in Kodesh Kodashim. Would there be a difference? You're both in the Holy of Holies. It doesn't change. But one, you know you're there, and therefore you're in awe. And the Rebbe would know not only that, but he'd know what is this place? What kind of place is this? It's a whole different type of experience. One would basically negate your seichel, and the other one, the seichel, would be part of the experience. Not because he's such a smart guy. It's because seichel, because the gili, the hafla has entered into your pnimius. You've been able to internalize it. Where for most of us, it would just be an awesome thing. It's not internalized. Just a different level. That he's qualifying. Listen, the Rebbe Rashab is thorough here.
No?
Huh?
What you said
Seichel
before.
is becoming a different seichel.
Yeah, clearly.
That was about Eifen hafla.
Yeah. That's Eifen hafla. Clearly, yeah, it's very good. This excellent. Like you say, there's an expression, Tachlis hayediyah shalei neda. The ultimate of knowing is lei neda, not to know, not knowing. So the simple interpretation is, the more you know, the more you realize how much you don't know. So the ultimate knowledge is the knowing that you don't know, which itself comes only when you know a lot. We're not talking about a child that says, I don't know, doesn't know, they don't know anything. Someone who knows so much realizes, wow, like you come to the top of the mountain, you say, wow, now I realize how much. Like today, 100 years ago, people were still able to say that almost everything has been invented. Today, nobody will say such a thing, because we know so much more. We see the depth, and we see the how many subatomic levels are there. Who knows? It can be endless. That's not Eifen hafla. That would be that flaw. Then there's an explanation in Tachos Yediyah Shlei Neda. Listen to this. The ultimate of knowing is to know the unknowable. Not to know that there is an unknowable, but to know the unknowable. Now you say, what does that mean? How do you know the unknowable? It's a point of hergish, yeah. It comes to the depth of understanding where your mind actually meets that which is beyond the mind. Quantum is very much like that. You can actually understand something. First of all, your limits of logic are not the same any longer. So you're able to comprehend things that are beyond.
This is the example here.
Exactly.
What? What'd you say? What's the example?
Yeah, but you see, that is lavdaf. That doesn't say which Rus is the Liba. That could be any one of them.
You can break it down, yeah.
No, there's an expression. Less machshava. No thought can capture him, but he's captured through the desire of the heart. It's actually a raya that machshava, seichel, and Rus Liba don't work together. Actually, it's interesting he doesn't bring it. It's a direct proof. We brought it earlier. It's basically less machshava tfisa beklal. No thought can capture him. Grasp right? Yeah, but tough is berusa deliba, but he's graspable, contained, whatever you want to have you, by rusa deliba. But rusa deliba is not machshava. See, machshava is a thought of parameters, an idea, machshava. But there is a level. That's ava b'tay. Ava b'tay nugim is generally the highest level of ava. You say it only on tzaddikim. People don't come to that so quickly. It's as we said, there's pnimi.
That's Tainig Murgish, I think, ava b'tay nugim. Because it's pnimius.
There's also Balti Morgish too.
Tainig Bilti Murgish could be that it's higher than that. That's the Eifen hafla.
You're saying you're guessing, or
I'm guessing.
I don't think it's completely correct. I'm not positive. But I will say this. 1 second. So Pnimi is Seichel, Rusad Liba is Makif, and Ava B'Tainugim is Pnimis HaMakif, which is Pnimi again. That's when the Seichel is the Eif and Half law. Eif and Half law requires really a bonding of a mind to understand the Etzem and understand.
It's also Rus of the Liba. It's a higher level.
The third example.
I wouldn't call that. He says it's a contemplation. It's not Rus of the Liba.
I think this was the third type where you can have the contemplation at the same time.
No.
Yeah, because this is all seichel.
No.
He's saying it's Rus of the Liba.
No. It's Rus of the Liba is coming from the way that you contemplate Rus of the Liba. There's two types of contemplation. One contemplation that nevad, that disappears, is lost once you reach the excitement, and another contemplation that remains. The mind remains even when there's the Rus Liba, but it's not Rus of the Liba. It's two different levels. Rus of the Liba and Seichel are not one.
No,
Seichel.
He's saying here, kasher Rus of the Liba he me'asogas eifen aflo.
Read on.
Alei he b'bchinas hava b'tanugim.
How do he? What's he? Go ahead. So what? So how's that contradict? It's two ways that bring to Rus Liba. One is both are hisbonenus. I'm sure what you're saying.
He's saying that the Rus of the Liba, this is the Ava B'Tanugim. If it is,
but we're talking about the Seichel now, not the Rus of the Liba, not the Ava B'Tanugim. We're talking about the hisbonenus. What is the hisbonenus?
The Oifen Aflo.
That's right. And that is not Rus of the Liba. That brings to Rus of the Liba.
But then he does say Rus of the Liba is Sichli, and that it's Mas Hasaga, Oifen Aflo. And that's Ahav B'Tainugim. Is that possible?
Seems like the highest level.
No. No. But so what are we talking about? Two hisbonenus that are bringing to something else. That's obvious. Come on, read it. It's so big. The result is Rus of the Liba. The question is how the two types of contemplation that bring it. That's the distinction. But they're both not Rus of the Liba. They're just two ways that bring it. What's the problem? No, they're not. The conclusion is Rus of the Liba. We're talking about what brings it is two ways that you can come to it. One hisbonenus that is nevad, seichel, and one is not. I don't know what the problem is exactly.
I thought it was you had Rus of the Liba and you still remain with seichel.
What does this mean?
That's
I don't understand why you want to say that this is not the Rus of the Liba.
I don't know what you're talking about. Hisbonenus and Rus of the Liba are not synonymous. Do you understand that?
Hisbonenus
brings to, which means it's not synonymous. Do you understand that?
That's correct. But
the Rus of the Liba is a result.
Hisbonenus and Rus of the Liba are not the same thing. That's all. That's all I'm saying. So what do you mean? That's all I'm saying.
There's no sacred role in Rus of the Liba?
If the Rus of the Liba comes,
that's all I said what I said. What are you explaining now to me? Are you disagreeing with what I just said?
I don't understand.
Hisbonenus brings to Rus of the Liba. So what's missing?
I want to
He's
clarify
saying that
this.
the Rus of the Liba could come from two different types of Zibonenus.
That's exactly right. So that's what we just learned.
It's coming to Oifen Aflo, then the Rus of the Liba is Ava B'Tanugim.
So?
The result.
So what?
But that has
Because he said
So what? So who's disagreeing?
B'Tanugim is higher than the Rus of the Liba.
Higher than the other Rus of the Liba.
and that has a
That's exactly what I said. But that's what he says here. What's the problem? I mean,
we're saying Rus of the Liba with Hasaga is Ahav B'Tainugim.
no. All Hasaga leads. The Rus of the Liba, there's two types. Rus of the Liba is brought to by hisbonenus, and there's one that's not brought through hisbonenus. I'm not sure what the...
Two types of hisbonenus and one without hisbonenus.
Right.
It's not mathematics. It's a very simple... yeah, exactly. Three type of levels, yeah.
So let me ask this again. So in the middle, the Rus of the Liba...
Bottom line, Rus of the Liba means desire. Desire and contemplation and seichel are not the same thing. That's for sure, no matter what you're talking, which level you're talking about. That's 100%. Now, the Rus of the Liba that has no hisbonenus at all, that's like Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, just awakens. You have awakening. That is one. So there clearly there's no seichel involved. There's no seichel. Then there's one that there's through contemplation throughout the year.
Are you going with
So-
Matana?
I don't use those words because he doesn't use those words here. I don't use words that the Rebbe Shab doesn't use that just confuse. Why do you need Matla Maila?
No, I'm asking, are you going from the highest level to the lowest?
I'm going in the order that he said here. The order here. The first one.
Not the one that's the highest level.
I don't know if it's the highest or lowest. Maybe it's the lowest. I don't know. It's Rosh Hashanah Kippur. It's a. Oh, you have to qualify. I mean, I don't. Each one has its milah.
So there's two types of response.
Then comes Rosh Hashanah throughout the year, which you don't have this natural awakening Rosh Hashanah, so you need to do something. So you contemplate, you think about. That thinking brings an excitement. The question now is, what happens to the seichel that brought to that? So there's one type, the seichel is nevad, it's lost, because it brought you there, but now the excitement has taken over. Like I said, you stand in awe of something, but you don't appreciate what you're standing in awe of. So the seichel brought you there. You're at the party now, but you don't necessarily appreciate it. Then there's Eifen Afla, someone who's able to contemplate on the Eifen, the type of grandeur that God is like. And that brings more of a pnimius. And that pnimius, the Rusa Liba, is more internalized. That's what he says, basically. But still not Seichel Rusa Liba. It just means Seichel can be there.
Can be. Okay.
It can be. Like the whole point is, remember we kept saying that you need a Kav Hamida to stop Rotzen, or else there's no Seichel. He's speaking now in Aveda. Rusa Deliba is in full glory, you can't have Seichel. He's qualifying that in one place you could have some Seichel.
Right.
That's basically, probably not complete Seichel either, because you're still taken by the awe. However, Seichel doesn't have to be lost. So there's some measure where they meet. It actually answers a fundamental question in the interface. Can Seichel meet Rusa Deliba?
Yes.
So now we have a place they can meet. But still, generally speaking, Rotzen is more powerful than Seichel. So when Rotzen is in full revelation, Seichel is usually on the wayside. Except in this scenario where he gave this qualified example.
Which is the ultimate one, so to speak.
It's the highest level for sure, because it's where Makiv becomes Pnimi.
The Rebbe is giving us a discourse.
Well, it means like this. Today you can stand in awe of something, but you don't. You're standing. It's Makiv. And when that Makiv becomes a Pnimi, that you can actually appreciate the thing that you stand in awe of, and still stand in awe of it. A lot of the secretaries of the Rebbeim didn't want to be secretaries, because they said if they're going to see the Rebbe every day, regular routine, they lose the hafla. Right. So to have both is quite difficult. So it's easier to stand in awe of something, like you're not supposed to see a king take a haircut or see him go to a mikveh or so on. Because, why? He's still the same king, we all know he takes a haircut, but because seeing it affects you. And we're human beings, we're mortals. So it's going to affect the Yiras HaMelech type of thing, the awe one has. But imagine a person can see that and stand, like it says, what does it say in Tanya? He brings the pasuk, which is a stira, you're not supposed to see a king without clothing. And it says that the teacher will no longer have garments. We'll see without the garments. The answer is because we will then be able to appreciate it while we're there. Today it's not so simple. Though it's all the dinim of Yiras HaMikdash, Shmiras HaMikdash is all based. Awe is based on distance. Yeah, it's a beautiful answer, but it says in Tanya there, that's what Einei Zela Teira, that you need Teira to help acclimate you, to help train you to be able to accept such gili without being blown away.
That's a good example of this.
Two things there. The Kanef and Merecha is two reasons. It's like the Kav HaMidah. Number one, we should be able to contain. If it was without any garments, we wouldn't be able to contain. Then it would be like the sunlight, would blind us. And second, we wouldn't have the right awe. If you were in there, it would be like you'd get used to it.
So Elizabeth and Diane needed the garments of it.
Yeah. So there's an element. There's an element of
Like, then gotta have the tzaddik, otherwise we'd be gone.
To be in awe of something and also appreciate it is usually a contradiction. To appreciate, I mean, like understand it. Because when you understand it, you control it to some extent. And awe is you're not in control of it. So to have both, that's what I kept saying about Moshe Rabbeinu when he says he wants to see God's face. So the Eibishter says, basically, the Pirush the Rebbe gives, the Ponim Yofis, back to the Tainus Esther, Memches. So the Rebbe's answer was, it's based on that you could see God, but not by looking at Him. So there's things you can see by looking, and there are things you can only see by not looking. So that same idea. If you look and it's like on your terms, then it's pnimius. So that's good. But it's not necessarily elikus, etzem. When you see etzem and you don't look, then you have the etzem, but your pnimius is not completely there. And the goal is ultimately both. But it's not a mathematical equation. It comes only through hard aveda of birur ha-gvul, birur ha-kav, to be able to get to the bli gvul. There's no way, there's no trick.
But this coexistence.
I just wanted to let you know.
This coexistence of seichel and nusach liba at the same time sounds to me that.
Yeah, but I could tell you that this Ava B'Tainugim you can only get probably after you do the first two very well. To jump there is going to be almost impossible. Because if you don't have seichel, period, how are you going to have seichel in the hafla? First, have seichel in God in the Giluyin. You go to exactly in Kuf Nun, you start to look. Most of us, let's be very blunt and honest. Most of us are thinking about our own needs. Forget about God altogether. Forget about the hafla. We're not even thinking about God mamala kalam. So let's first, at least a few 5 seconds a day, talk about God in the pipes before you talk about God outside of the pipes. And then you then you talk about God outside the pipes. Okay, I got it. Then you talk about the eifin of the grandeur outside. That's a whole other level. So you're talking about, there's no way you can go there without there. I mean, yeah, Rosh Hashanah Kippur gives you a express train, but it's also not lasting until, that's why you need Aveda Kol Hashanah Kula. You can't live on Rosh Hashanah Kippur the whole year. It has to come back to Aveda Primis. Fananda Pak and the Peklach. There's no way around. What can I tell you? I know we all want I trust me, all my research, I can't find any way in, except as they say, the only way, what do they say? The only way out is through. The only way out is through. As I get this.
Now we know the surface.
No, you can be lifted for a moment. Hashem Kippur, the Rebbe. It's obviously this thing that can just schlep you and suddenly give you a sense. But the journey is the journey. And when you come to peace with that, actually, it's a good place, because you come to peace that the struggle is part of it, and you have to work. And you work. The only thing I can say, we have the gift today that the Rebbe told us one of the so-called magic pills. If you want a quick fix, is teaching others, being a shliach. If you're not absorbed by yourself, including your own kedusha, and you're giving others, it'll always speed up the process, 100%. Because on your own, sitting and learning, you don't have to explain it to someone else. Okay, you're going to go and you fall asleep and half asleep, But if you're with others, there's a motivation there, and it forces tamidiyas makula. So that is actually, but it's also work. It's not, it's not taking a pill. It just means it's a method that was called. What do we say? How do you say speeds up? Not speeds up.
Accelerates.
Accelerates, right? Accelerates the process. 100%. That I could tell you. I know this personally. So that's good, but that's also commitment, and that works. So now we need a big parenthesis. We got to go back and now conquer the parentheses.
When we first learned it, I thought that the level of the coexistence between Seichel and Tainug was like the lower level. When I explained it, that it was the higher level.
Ava Tainugim is clear highest level. That's for sure. That's how I know it's the highest. Even though he doesn't say it's the highest, but it's yeah.
Makif is even higher than Pnimi.
But he says, you see in the parentheses, he says that Pnimi is a Makif is Pnimi.
And then the level of Shoshana is...
The question is, why would the Rebbe Rashab be telling all this Arusa de Liba when we simply we have other levels to get through? Okay, well, he's given us the whole picture. So what do you think? So we're going to finally start the Aveda of this, implementing it?
That's why we go through the words on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, even though we're getting this.
What time is it?
The words are...
11:06.
I do want to do the parentheses. I at least want to get that behind us. Huh? No, I'm going to do the parentheses. No, it's not going to be an hour. Now it's far. Now it's coming. Now we know where the Rebbe Rashab is going at least, and then goes back. I know at least this is self-contained. So the next step is Ratzon and Seichel. Wow. Kav Hamida. Tremendous stuff, because the Aveda, if you really want to go deeper, the Aveda really helps you understand the Haskalah. Tremendous way. The Kav Hamida is the Kav that creates the flow, the regulation, and the Ratzon needs to be regulated. But then Seichel can go into. He's already answering actually Knei Hamida and Kav Hamida. Actually, the Ava B'Tainugim, like in a way, answers it. If I were to be bold enough to say, because it's saying it's still Kav Hamida. It's still coming. Ratzon is Ratzon, Seichel is Seichel. But because the Seichel is in the Eifna flaw, it allows the pipe to participate in the awe, in the desire. That's what it looks like, and without destroying the structure, because that's the key. That's just my thought. In other words, Ava b'tainugim would be like Knei Hamida, not Kav Hamida. Kav Hamida would be the Rusa Deliba. Yeah, I just need to say that. Rusa Deliba on the lower level, meaning that the Seichel is not there. That's Kav Hamida. So it's a measure. Stops, Rotzen stops. Knei Hamida would allow Chesed to join in. So there's Ava b'tainugim where now Seichel is appreciating the awe. That would be, that work, if that fits, that would be very nice. That's it's a guess.
But you're sure that with the seichel is not there is the lower level?
Nothing to talk about.
Okay.
What do I mean lower level? It's more the structure. The structure is more in place. As Rotzen is here, Seichel is here. Yeah, that's not even a shaila. Ava b'tainugim is a very deep level. Ava b'tainugim, I told you, it's said on the Ava b'tainugim. Ava is not just loving God. Loving God itself is a pretty nice level. Tainugim means loving God with the deepest passion, the deepest unconscious of your whole presence. It's a tzaddikim reach out. In Tanya he says Ava b'tainugim one of the highest levels, I think.
Yeah.
I remember all the levels, but it's a lot. It's a very high level.
Probably not all the tzaddikim.
Yeah, but that's what I thought, that Ava b'tainugim is having a mortgage. There's a level that's even deeper.
You added the word mortgage.
Yeah.
Who said it's mortgage? She doesn't say mortgage. It says pnimi. It could be built in mortgage and a pnimi also, by the way.
It could be.
Yeah. But that's not for here. Listen, I don't want to go further than what he says. He says.
What about the parentheses?
Let's do the parentheses. I'm going to do the parentheses. So the parentheses adds a whole nother dimension to this whole thing. Because here, remember, he's talking about, and I keep going back to the key points, not to lose sight. How are we doing? My Wednesday classes are simpler? A little, right?
Probably.
Yeah. The challenge is now how to explain this.
You're explaining it fine.
Okay, good. See, you're so quiet.
You're looking for I'm listening.
Okay, you're absorbing. Good. That's good.
Makes sense.
We know each other back from years ago, my Wednesday night class back in Manhattan, 15 years ago probably. Yeah. Okay, the parentheses now goes into, first of all, qualifying the issue of Midas. How does Midas fit into this whole thing? The bottom of Shin Yud Gimel, 313. No, I think it's going to be, the parentheses now, I think is relatively... So here's the story. So the Rebbe Rashab, remember we're saying now that Rotzen, if Rotzen doesn't have a stop, Seichel can't emerge. In Aveda that means Rusa Deliba is not Sichli. Even if it comes from Seichel, it's still not Sichli. Not talking about Ava Tanugim is a qualification, but that's not he hasn't even gotten to that. Remember, you have to now ignore after the parentheses. So you can't cheat and bring Ava Tanugim into the picture here. So just assuming now all we're talking about is two types of Rusa Deliba, the first two. One without his badnus, like Yom Kippur or Shem Kippur, and one with, but once you're excited, the Seichel is outside. Just keep that in mind. So L'cheira is asking a question here. Not L'cheira a question, he's qualifying. L'cheira you could say the same argument, that there's a so-called one has to stop for the other one to emerge with Midas. Just like Rotzen, when is it revealed? Only when the Seichel is not there. Or when it's revealed, Seichel can't be there. Same thing with Midas. They're revealed only when the Seichel is concealed. So he distinguishes three distinctions now in the parentheses that distinguish Midas from Rotzen. Now, the purpose of the parentheses, my assumption is, because the Rebbe Rashab wants to give us the whole structure of the spheres. So it's true that Seichel too needs the Kav Hamida, the regulator, to stop the Seichel, or else Midas won't emerge. But it's not the same way how Rotzen and Seichel work. So Rotzen is up here, Seichel is here, and Midas are down here. That's key. So it's true, for Midas to emerge, you need Seichel to be concealed. For Seichel to emerge, you need Rotzen to be concealed. But it's not the same. You can't just say, because conceal Seichel and you get Midas or Rotzen. There's a key distinction between how Midas work and how Rotzen. What's the distinction? So Levad Zeis, here's the first distinction. Besides the fact, and this besides goes for a good 10 lines, that the Etzem Uhusim and their personality, their core personality, desire, and feelings are not at all comparable to one another. The midas midas is subjective feeling. Hergesh atzmi means you feel. I feel myself. Well, commission is bar le'el peder kuf samach test, like we learned before. Kuf mem test 149. What does it mean? He wants the revelation and the energy in the revelation because it's good for him. So there's the him, the me is there, very loud and clear. Yes, it's not a me being satisfied by material and selfish interests. It's a me being satisfied by the divine revelation, but it's me, hergish midas, or else it's not midas. That's what a midah is. A midah means I want something. I'm attracted to something. I'm drawn to something. V'harotzen, this is a kmer. Ein adem, he says they're not comparable to one another. Rotzen is the opposite extreme. Harotzen shalamaylam ha'seichel hu adrabah. Harotzen that's higher than seichel. Midas is lower than seichel. Harotzen desire that's higher than seichel. Adrabah bitl kol atzmusei. It's the nullification of your whole core. Like he says in Tanya, so he says, Hagam sheti ayin ve'efes mamish. Ayin ve'efes, that even though the soul will become nullified and nothingness and null and void, but this battle sham b'mitzias legamri. This is Tanya, and it'll completely be this battle nullified. Ayin ve'efes is too deep. The ayin is null, and efes is completely nothingness. And nullified from the Mitzias Legamri. Nevertheless, a soul starts. Af bekin zeretzena v'chefza betiva. That's the desire. That's the will and the desire by nature of a soul, like a flame, always searching upward. Even though if it got what it wanted, it would lose its identity because it would be part of the big mother flame. But that's what it desires. So it's the opposite of the midah. Midas is bringing it down. That God is good for me. So I'm better with God than without Him. So just replacing, instead of money, God. Not again, it's still kedusha, not take away from it. But the hergish atzmei is there. Here, you're ready to expire. Now he's going to qualify this too into two levels. That there's another parenthesis within this.
It's good for me not to be me anymore. That's
even if you do say that, it's different than good for me to be me and God. Yes, you could say what you said. He's going to say that. It's good for me to not be me. That's fine. But it's still a higher level than it's good for me to be me and having God too. Have the cake and eat it too. So, fine. What you said is he's going to actually say that in different terms.
This is what it is.
Yeah. But the difference is that Rotzen, if it was the midah wouldn't say I want to become part of the mother flame. The midah would say, "Bring me, come back, come, give me all that you give me. I want it in my terms. Come to my house.
So this is,
not I'm going to you."
So that's not
that would be like that would be the difference, like you going to Godland, you going to the Beis Hamikdash and becoming nullified there, or saying bring the Beis Hamikdash to my house and I'll give you a nice guest room. Yeah. That's the stinkle difference.
But this was no different view.
He doesn't say it. I don't want to say another view, because another view was a rotzi without a shruv. He doesn't say that.
That's what it is. That you don't want to be me.
No. Not necessarily. Here it's a positive thing. It could be ava b'chol meidecha.
It was a positive thing, but it was lacking, you said.
No, because this next step can lead to pitchis, and it comes down.
Right.
He doesn't say this is. Another view is only expiration.
Right.
Yeah. Now he qualifies. We still call it a desire. Once you call it a desire, it's no longer complete. What's the word for it? Complete substanceless. Right. Al kaponim. So therefore, in another place it explains there's still yesh misharetza. There's someone that desires. So there's me saying, I don't want to be me. That would be more complete. So yes, you're nullifying, but it's the me that's getting nullified. There's an entity. And this brings us to two types of machid. There's makiv the chaya. Makiv the Chai is what we just said. And Makiv the Yechida she'ein b'chinas rotzen klal. Yechida means Yechida liyachdach. It's complete oneness, total fusion. There's no rotzen even. Kishalhevas elam eleh, like a flame that rises on its own. Bli b'chira v'rotzen klal. It's not the rotzen in the flame wants to rise. It's just complete natural rising without choice or will or desire at all, and like it says elsewhere.
So it is nobody.
You could say Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Well, no. It's the difference would be that one works on it in a sense, like imchle, that one works on getting such a desire. So I am like me, but I want a desire now to become nullified. By midas, I'm not looking to be nullified. I'm looking the godliness should be inside of me, and it's good for me.
No, I'm saying you.
Understand? So then there's a state where it's just complete fusion. I would just basically say it's like melting into it. It's like the real Yom Kippur, the full Yom Kippur experience. It's not even you feeling it. You're just completely consumed by a flame, like he says, without b'chira rotzen. There's no choice. There's no work here. Rotzen is still something desiring. I am desiring it. It's a subtle difference, but it's a difference. One is with some type of effort. There's some identity is doing something. Yom Kippur, when you say Yom Kippur, where a person just completely was overtaken by the experience and without absolutely, like they'll say, I was just carried
away.
Yeah, and I didn't know, I didn't want it, I didn't desire it. I actually maybe didn't even want it, and it just took over. It's different. There's another place where you are putting a little aveda. And Ratzon is some Aveda. There is some Aveda.
I actually wanted it.
But Chat Katira is Qatar now.
One searched for it, was looking for it, and one just happened to have it.
Yeah. I mean, there's many. Look, he says Mavur Mokamachak Mishkan twice, so it would probably be elaborated elsewhere, more detail. I don't recall now which Maimorim talk about this, but there's definitely. It's a very interesting distinction. Okay, fine. But the bottom line is he made the first distinction between Midas and Ratzon. Very clear. So the fact that Midas also emerged with the concealment of Seichel, it's not the same as the desire that's there without Seichel. The desire without Seichel is going into the source, the Rusa Deliba. And Seichel doesn't work there. Midas without Seichel is going into me and my needs, so the Seichel needs to be concealed because it's about subjective needs. Except in this case, it's needs that are called the divine. God is good for me. He's not even dismissing it. Some places it says that a person who comes to the point that understands that God is good for me, on their terms, is a very deep level. Because it means you exist and you appreciate God even on your terms. However, talking about levels of bittul, obviously Ratzon is a bit deeper bittul and the deepest bittul. Yeah. I'm not going to start complicated matters. That earlier we learned there's Pnimis Hamidus. So Pnimis Hamidus actually can come to a state. Remember, the interface is so complete that once you figure out that something is good, God is good for you, you can come to a point appreciating the grandeur of the divine. That's what he said in chapter 150. And then even your Midas, Pnimis Hamidus, can come to feel, that's the Hergish Sichli. They can also go into becoming Abba B'Tainugim that we're learning. But that's a different level. Initially, it's not that way. I don't think so. Ruslib is Ratzon. And Pnimis Hamidus probably can reach there later.
Well, there's definitely a path, right?
Well, Lev is Lev. So Rusa Delib is the Ratzon of the Lev. I don't know I'm not sure. I have to go back to see. Maybe he used that he may have somewhere connected to. I'm not positive. Rusalib is definitely something that connects Midas to something deeper, but here he's not going there. Here he wants to make it clear that Midas and Rusalib are two different things. So he's not talking about Pnimis Hamidus here, that's for sure. It's Chitzenis Hamidus. So I just said it as a qualification based on learning earlier with the Ovis that they also reach a level of Pnimis. I have to go back and really compare the actual words. So let's go on. So he's still explaining. And the reason for this is because in Midas and feelings, there isn't that hergish aliki kol chach. You don't have that divine sensation so much. Rather, the feeling that the closeness to God is leitev, is good for him. So it's not eliki, hergish aliki on its own, in its pristine form. It's already colored by the benefit to me. Or to him. He's explaining the qualification. So the first point he made was that that Midas is Hergish Atzmei and Ratzon is Bittul Atzmei. Very different. One is what I need, what I want, what's good for me. One is nullifying myself. Okay. But he's explaining, because by Midas, the main Hergish is you. But God is good for you. In Ratzon Zusliba, Hergish Ein Sof B'Yeser. There, the primary feeling is the Ein Sof. You sense the power of the Ein Sof. Al-Keinu b'chinas bittul kol mitzvusei. And that's why he's ready to completely nullify his whole existence. So it's very different. It's almost 2 points in point number 1 here. Number 1 point, one is Hergish Atzmei feeling, and the other is bittul. But the reason for that is because one, you feel more yourself and less godliness, even though you feel God is good for you. And the other one, you're feeling more God, what God wants, or God's presence, and less about you. That's basically. You could say that by the Nadav they had more the Kirvus Leitev, and that's where they got burned. Yeah, he doesn't say it specifically, but yeah. You could also argue the other way around, that they had even deeper Hergish Eliki, but they didn't have the bittul to the Kavona. I'm not sure. Now comes.
It's not connected directly to the Inyan. This is like a biur, that's like a parenthesis.
Well, it's connected and not. I mean, it helps understand the whole picture, because he's trying to talk about the structure of Ratzon, Seichel, Midas. Okay, but as soon as Hine now comes after Levadzais, this is now point number 2. I'll make even a number 2 here. Hine Levadzais, he started in the beginning of the parentheses. Now comes point number 2. Hine Gamba Eifen Heisedus Haratzon. So this was that there's the actual difference between Midas and Ratzon, between feelings, subjective feelings, and desire. Now he's saying that also the Eifen Heisedus Haratzon, the way desire awakens and the way emotions awaken are very different. That's what he's going to say now. So besides their personality, the difference in their actual personality, there's also a difference of how they emerge. Like we learned, the second one, the Rusa Liba that comes up Pitam Vadas, based on contemplation, as we said, when does the Rusa Liba become full glory, its excitement? Is after
the Ratzon.
The Rusa Liba.
No, not the Rusa Liba. It's the same.
Ratzon is the Rusa.
Okay, fine.
No. He's dividing here between Ratzon and Rusa Liba. I think so.
I don't think so. No. It doesn't matter. Maybe. We'll see. What's that? I mean, okay, difference between Ratzon and Midas. That's what he's talking about. That's why he's using Ratzon. The Ratzon is that the awakening of the Ratzon is after you conceal the understanding, the comprehension and contemplation. But the Usa Deliba, who says he be'ez take of his galas edamech.
I think the Ratzon here is Midos.
No. And Usa Deliba is the awakening that's even be'ez take of his galas edamech. Well, Moshe wanted to suggest that Al Pitam Vadas is Rusa Liba Al Tam Vadas, and Rusa Liba is the one that's now Al Pitam Vadas. Correct? That's what you were suggesting. I'm not sure if that's correct. It's hard to say. Let me see a second. Maybe it's a Ratzon and Rusa Liba. No, but that doesn't make. One second. Let me just.
I think at the end of the parentheses it claims.
In Levad Zeh Shebetzim Husin Ein Dem Klal V'Klal Claim Dem Klal Midas is this and Ratzon is that. Hine Eifen Gam Be'Eifen Eisedus Haratzon Hadishal Pitam B'Das V'Dav Kolechson Dam. Hold on a second. I think it's correct. So Al Pitam V'Das is true that the Ratzon is specifically after it's concealed, which means would make it similar to Midas. But Usa Deliba, that's pure, the one that's awakened, that's a Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, based on what he said later, who says Subez take of his Gal Seder Amechen. Or does he mean Avabit Hainugim? Wow. Okay, let's read. This was the place where we got complicated. Let's read the parentheses and we'll see. Bottom line, he said we need to go back. We're not sure exactly, but let's just argument say Rusa Liba is there's clearly a Seder's baby. It's the take of his Gal Seder Amechen, something he did not say till now. Because till now he kept saying Rusa Liba, even if it comes from his Hisbonenus, the Hisbonenus the Seichel has to be nevat, has to be lost. Now he's saying Rusa Liba They say this is be'ez take of his galus ed hameichen.
Because it's not never, it's never. Big difference.
Meaning, okay, so now he says v'hainu. And this is like what he says elsewhere. The bekeches hagluyim harimeichen midis ef shaliyas yachat. In the revealed faculties, mind and heart, intellect, cognitive and emotional, cannot reside together. The base is galus hameichen hu l'mayla ma'midis. When the galus hameichen, when the mind is revealed, it's higher than feelings and inclinations. V'amidis mevalbun el hameichen. And actually, emotions at that point will confuse and disturb the intelligence. So when a person is engrossed, immersed in an idea, it's beyond my feelings. If you start bringing feelings in, like, I feel this, I feel that, I'm hungry, or someone needs something, or this, or the seichel is, it's not the way I would like it, you're going to be vulnerable, you're going to confuse and disturb the flow of intelligence. And it's only after the mind stops flowing, so to speak, that you pause. There's a cessation to the intellectual activity. There can be midas. Like we're explaining here. The whole idea of kavamida, right? Kavamida, like you said in the beginning of the parentheses, that for midas to emerge, you need to have hefsek hamecha. You need to have the concealment of the intelligence. Or but midas hanalamim, this is keiches hagluyim. This is faculties as they're functioning. Basically, when you're using your mind, you're sitting and learning, and suddenly a subjective interest comes into play, it's going to affect your mind. If you're going to get into anything like someone said to you, listen, I need to go somewhere, or something, a need that you have, you're going to have to stop the mind from flowing. So you need the midas to emerge, you need the meichen to pause. That's in keiches gluyim. But in keiches nalamim, midas hanalamim, or bekeiches hanalamim rather, yechelim liyas biyachat. They can reside together. They can be together. Meichen and midas, that is. The be'es is galus hameichen, yachal liyas hamidas. What threw me last time was we're just talking about nalamim, not his galus. And now he's saying be'es is galus hameichen, yachal liyas hamidas. So I'm assuming that the midas are nalamim. So when you talk on the level of the keiches nalamim, you could have also the midas. Uberusad liba, and then the parentheses he adds, Uberusad liba, mavur kan hu dafka beis take of his galus hameichen. But he said right before this parentheses. And the Uberusad liba that's being explained here, it's specifically during the intensity of the revelation of the mind. Let's read on. That would assume the keiches in the loving, right? That's because these midas on the keiches nalamim level are not a contradiction. Very simple, because there's no sense of self. There's no self-interest. Because you're not talking about midas that are revealed. You're not talking about I want this, I want that. You're talking about internal emotions that are not in any way expressed yet. So they have no problem. They don't contradict the seichel.
Internal means unconscious.
Not active, I would say. Inactive.
But it's active, clearly.
It's not active.
But it's not gili.
Well, how is it could be active without gili? Explain to me.
Your body has tendencies to want to do something, but then you're not conscious of them.
If they do so, then they disturb the mind. If they do, then if they're revealed,
wants to digest food. And yet you're thinking about
that's not a good example. Body that wants to digest food is not a midah. That's a natural physical process. It has to be some type of emotion. Chesed, love, attraction. Yeah, you love your child, but while you're learning, you're not thinking about it. So your midah is nelam, and it's not a contradiction. That's bapashtas what he's saying. It's not active, basically. It's not a revealed dimension. It seems like what he's saying. I don't see any other way to explain it. If it's revealed, if your son comes over to you and you're in the middle of learning, it's going to disturb. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. Maybe it's more important, but they don't work together. I want to read on. I can't say everything. Actually, it's more confusing now than it was last time, for some reason. You know? It's like I know, because now we know more. It's better than when we didn't know so much. We thought we understood it. Now we know more. But that part of it, I find that to be very healthy. That means we're closer to understanding it. Because now we know, we don't know. Right. What does that have to do with this? It's confusing enough. Why do you have to bring more?
As far as it has to do with Midas, and Hasaga is pure.
What does that have to do with this?
But she's saying you have to divest yourself of Midas when you're at the level.
Okay, anyway, so he said this Harotznu b'teikav his galas hameichin. V'zeu, I'm sorry. V'zeu deberusa deliba. He said this Harotznu b'teikav his galas hameichin. That's the end of the parentheses. Okay, it's clearly another dimension of Rusa Deliba, which may be a fourth dimension. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it's the Gehava b'tainugim. It's hard to say. I'll just tell you what I've read. And simple pshat without anything, and tell me what you're reading. You have to really apply yourself here. I would not venture to try to bring anything else into this picture, just to simply understand pshat. It seems to be, I'm talking now very mathematical. He spoke about two types of Rusa Deliba.
Before the practice.
Before the one that's like Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, that just happens, awakening. One according to contemplation, the Seichel Nevad disappears, is lost after the excitement. Good. He explained in the parentheses the distinction between Midas and Ratzon. The first distinction, that Midas are about my feeling, and Ratzon is nullifying yourself to something higher. Now, he's speaking about Eifen. He's saying there's also a distinction. So the key thing we're looking for here, and I think this is where you got to find the crux of the issue, is how is he explaining that the way that the desire awakens is also different than the way emotions awaken. That's what it looks like he wants to say. That's what I would venture to guess. Because Hinegam seems to me a conclusion to Levadzes. Now if I'm correct, that's what we need to be. That's the detective work here. Would you all agree? That it seems like Hine Levadzes, that they're not, that the Etzem Husam Mechen and Midas and Ratzon are not similar. Hine Gamba Eifnei Seres Ratzon. There's also a distinction. That's what it seems like he's saying. But I don't see him concluding it.
Distinction between what?
Midas and Ratzon. That's the whole point of the parentheses. You have to go back to the whole point of the parentheses. Start Hine Levadzes. I just said it. Listen to what I'm saying. Levad Zeis. Where's the end of the nigun of Hine Levad Zeis? But Pashtus, it's this. Hinegam. Whenever you say Hine Levad Zeis, Hinegam is usually the conclusion. That's what I'm trying to figure out, and I can't figure it out for the life of me. But then I'm thinking maybe it's not. Maybe the conclusion is later.
What about the Afal Peking?
1 second. What Afal Peking?
On the first line of Shin Dal, maybe that's the end of the Levad Zeis.
No, that's a No. That's part of Tanya. No.
So Levad is that there is a difference between Midas and Ratzon.
Besides the fact that
in Ratzon itself.
How does the logic of that work? Levad Zeis.
That there is a difference between Midas and Ratzon. That Midas is Atzmoi and Ratzon is.
But no, start with the Lechera. But you have to start with the Lechera. There's a question. Well, Lechera is Elkamay Hamidis. So Levad Zeis that the Mehus is different. There's also a difference in the Eifen. Why? But he began with Midas. It has to be related. Why is it relevant if it's not connecting to Midas? He started a question. Lechera Zeb Midas. Levad Zeis is an answer to a question. But you're saying he's gone away from the question. He's now going Alavadzes without a question. No. No. Read it. It says L'cheira. Why don't you start from L'cheira? It has to fit to the L'cheira. That I'm sure of. I have no question in that. But even so, what's still Hinigam be'efni Seder Sarot, and also in the way they say, let me just read it again.
Why did he close the parenthesis in the middle? He didn't finish it.
He did finish it. And then it says in the bottom, you have a footnote in the bottom says the parenthesis ends after the words take of his galas hamechin.
No, but here, why is this here?
He says in the footnote. There's a footnote that says where the parentheses
no,
ends.
about the higher parentheses. What do you mean he didn't finish?
Everything is finished.
Where's he supposed to finish?
He said, "V'hainu v'nish yom bidis and the hergesha l'ki u'v'asan b'rus l'dinim u'hergesha yisod v'yesel." So this ending of the parenthesis should not be here with flower, because he's still talking about.
It's not correct. You maybe have an old edition. It's very clear here.
No, he's talking about the upper parentheses from Raklish. Is that?
No. It's perfect. It works perfectly. No, that's very clear.
Skip the small parentheses in the parentheses. If we skip this and we try to continue the flow, maybe we'll understand.
I did.
Yeah?
And the Hine Gam is not a possibility.
Let me see. I agree, because that parenthesis is just explaining.
Yeah.
Take it. 1 second.
Continue with the flow.
Va'id. No, the problem is the va'id. It starts with a va'id.
The end of the
That's a
parentheses
third.
is a new
That's the
ending.
thing. Exactly.
I also
That's the
tried
problem.
that.
I also, that was the problem all the time too. The va'id is an ayamais. Okay. Either we move on or we heard of it.
Wouldn't that be where it is?
What does he mean when he says shal pi tam v'das? What is he referring to? Arus
Give me a second. Okay, I think I understand the pshat. It is the way you said it, I think, l'chatchila. It just bothers me because the language is not really fitting, but it's the closest thing I can figure out right now. The second distinction is like this. Remember, the question on the table is midas similar to Ratzon? So we know now they're not, because of reason number one, levadzes. They're fundamentally different, but there's also another difference. For midas to emerge, seichel must be concealed. There's no way around that. You can't do anything about it. Because seichel and midas are two opposites. Gluyim. A midas is my feeling, seichel is objective, that's subjective. With Ratzon and seichel, there is a scenario where you have to conceal the Ratzon, but there's a scenario where you don't have to conceal it. That's what he's saying. That's the Eifen. So not always, yeah. So it's very similar. It's very awfully similar to the Ava B'Tainugim level after the parentheses, but I don't think it's that. I think it's a fourth dimension, but maybe not. So that's what he's saying. That there's another distinction between Ratzon and Midas and Eifen. Ratzon is not fundamentally. Midas cannot be there. Gluyim, not concealed midas, cannot be there when there's seichel. It's two different modes. Are you in a mode of trying to understand the idea, or are you in the mode of understanding what is in it for me? Ratzon, even though we did say Ratzon, when a person is very strong-willed, seichel doesn't work. But there is a scenario where you could have a rusa deliba, and your seichel is absolutely full intensity. That's what he's saying. They have what's going on. A person is, let's say, learning chassidus, and he calls here, what does he call it? That's the whole key word here. Beis teikif is galus ed hamechin. Is the intensity of his galus of a major revelation or major concept that you're learning chassidus. You can have a Rasus Liber right there, and they will not contradict each other. We're not talking now whether it's Ava B'Tainugim and you appreciate the awe or you appreciate the hafla. He's not even going there. But you can have, that's what he's saying, there's a Rasus Liber, but you could have a complete Rasus Liber while there's his Galus Eramech. That's what he says here. So the way I would sing the niggin here would be like this. So besides the difference between Meichen and Midas, besides the difference between Midas and Ratzon, that Midas is Hergeshas, you feel yourself Kirvisley, and Ratzon is nullifying to above. Hinegama, Eifon is Seirus. Also in the way they're awakened, there's a difference between Ratzon and Midas. Eifon is Seirus, Haratzon. Harishal Tam V'das, yeah, Tam V'das, it's similar to Midas. Hudaf Gelach Hashem Esalam Asog. There, it's a given. That's like Midas. That the only place where you could have a Ratzon, in other words, a Ratzon that's al pitam v'das, a Ratzon that comes from intelligence, So the only way that there can be one second. Yeah, that since it comes up Pitam V'das, it's only after the Hasagis bonus is concealed, like he said, that you come to the state of excitement, of Ratzon. Let's say Ratzon. So in other words, Ratzon al Pitam V'das is similar to Midas. In Rus Liba, you can have an awakening that's completely there when the intensity of the Meichen is revealed. So in the parentheses he says how. So he gives an example. When the Midas, it's how when the Midas are Nalomim, they can reside side by side. When they're Gluyim, they can't. Similarly, Rusa Deliba can reside side by side because Rusa Deliba seemingly looks like to be a Keich Nelam that's being exposed, and that can reside side by side with Meichen. That's what he's saying. On one of this, I'm not sure what it means. Well, let me finish. So this to me seems to be what he's saying. They say Hainu K'mishkos the Bekeiches and Gluyim Hadameichen Midas. They cannot be together.
And that's the way they're similar to Midas.
It's similar to Ratzon al Pitam V'das. Commission Mavur Kam. Ubemkeches Anom Yechelem Lias. Ubris Liba Mavur Kanu Davke Beis Take of his Galas HaMeichen. That's what he adds. But Rus Liba that he's explaining here is specifically take of that means another type of Rus Liba that he wasn't speaking about before.
How is it a flaw?
One second. And that's because Midas that an alam is not a Hagashatz. We've got Midas and Mivalmamech. So we take his Galas HaMeichen. Okay. It could be here, Midas and Alamim, by the way, maybe is very similar to Rus Liba. Maybe. And maybe a little inclination. This is how I would understand it. I don't have the Avon of it, but I think technically that's what he's saying here.
Could you explain the flow?
I just explained it.
Okay.
You didn't, because you were in the middle of asking a question while I was explaining it.
No. Okay. The Vadzois said there is a difference between Midas and Ratzain, because this is...
No, that's not what I said.
No, I'm asking you. Hine, how are you continuing the Hine?
I just said it. I said it very loud and clear. Did I not? Want me to say it again? But listen. I don't think you heard what I said. Because you're asking me something I just said. I'm convinced I just said it. So I'm not... the question is L'cheira. You keep forgetting the first line of the parentheses. That's why you're having a problem. There's a question here. L'cheira, you could say Midas are just like Ratzon. Their revelation is only when the Seichel is concealed. So he's answering two things so far. He's answering. Besides the fact that Ratzon and Midas are not the same personality, because Midas is self. What's in it for me? It's a self. Ratzon is nullification to above. Ilavadzes, in addition to that, Hinigam, the way Ratzon is awakened, so Tam V'das Take, you need to conceal the Seichel, like by Midas. But if it's not Al Pi Tam V'das, it's Rus Liba, pure Rus Liba, it could be there because Galas take of HaMeichen, which Midas can't have. That's the second distinction. So
he's saying the Kava Midah is that it has to be something in between.
We're talking now when the Kava Midah is not working. This whole point of Rus Liba is that's the whole point. That if Rus Liba is full intensity, oh yes, absolutely. That's exactly the point. There is a Rus Liba where there is Seichel. That's what he's saying here. There is a different type. There's two types. He began by saying Rus Liba is not Sichli. It's nothing to do with Seichel. Then he said even the one that comes from Seichel, the Seichel goes away and now you're excited. So it's then he said, isn't that like Midas? So he says, no. Midas is Hergesh Atzmei. And the second thing, Midas cannot coexist with Seichel. And Rus Liba could coexist with Seichel. It's just a distinction between Midas. The Kava Midah, fine. There, the Ratzon and the Seichel are coming side by side. Rus Liba and Seichel are coming side by side. That's what he's saying here. So it is similar to Ava B'Tainugim where they do.
There is no difference between Midas and Ratzon. If you're talking Ratzon shall be Tam V'das.
Tam V'das, but that's what he's qualifying. But Rus Liba is not Tam V'das. Who Hergish, he says clearly. Rus Liba, who she says be'ez take of his galas, not when it's in a chanami. That's correct. Let's not be Tam V'das, and the second distinction would be not a major distinction. You could say it's very similar. That Ratzon emerges when the Seichel is concealed, And Midas emerge when the Seichel is concealed.
This is like the Midas is Beis Galuson. Yes, with the Chur, or this is the Midas.
What he's trying to actually say in Havana, I'm not sure, but it seems to me this is the addition that he's adding. When you read Pshat, that's what it looks like. We'll read it again and again until we get it. And let's do the third one, and then we'll stop till the end of the parentheses. V'oid. A third thing. To be Midas hare amidahu min ha'asogav is bonus. And by Midas, the Midah, the feeling comes from the contemplation, the comprehension and contemplation. Like we learned earlier, chapter 150. What do we learn? There's a particular contemplation to bring you to that brings to the feeling of love. There's a particular contemplation that brings the feeling of awe, respect. By contrast, that's a distinction Usdaliba and Midas. This is the third distinction. The awakening of the desire is from the sense of Ein Sof. Not from sensing the grandeur of Ein Sof, but from the hergish of Ein Sof itself. And the contemplation, the comprehension and contemplation in the grandeur of Ein Sof, that's in order to bring you to feeling the Ein Sof. And from this he comes to an awakening with an intense desire, intense will. So what do we have in the third distinction?
Seems like a two-step process.
One second. Yeah, by Midas, the awakening of a Midah comes from contemplation. And Rus Liba, it's not from contemplation, it's from sensing Ein Sof. It's a different type of thing. Remember before, in the distinction number 1, he said something similar. He said the Midah is interested not in the Hergish of Ein Sof, it's Hergish Atzmei, on the Lakus. Whereas in Rotzen is the Hergish Ein Sof. So he's now saying similar, but I think he's going much deeper, because he's or stronger. He's saying the difference is that the way you come to, this is the way V'oid, the way you come to a Midah, how do you come to feeling love for God? So before he just said what love is. The love is the love for yourself, and you love God because He's close to, because it's good for you. Now he's saying, how do you come to this love? You come through a contemplation. You don't come through because you're sensing Elikus. Midas don't sense Elikus, they sense themselves. Contemplation makes them sense also that God is good for them. By the Rotzen, by Rus Liba, it's the other way around. It's not through a contemplation. It's through a sensing of the divine. Your heart desires because it senses the divine. How do you get to sensing the divine? You could have a contemplation of the grandeur, but the primary thing is from sensing the divine. In Midas, it's never sensing the divine. It's always a feeling. What's good for me. The mind tells you what's good for you. It helps you understand. In Rotzen, it's ultimately the Rotzen that's the connection. It's not the Seichel. That's the key thing. I think this is a critical point. This is the real distinction. Yes. So even though Seichel brings to Rus Liba, that's why the excitement is not there. Okay, but then what about when it's Galus Eid when it's very, very intense? Yeah, it doesn't matter. The point why a person has Rus Liba is not like the Midah. Midah gets feeling because a contemplation, a logical argument was made to convince the Midah. In Rus Liba, it's not a logical argument that convinces it, it's the sense of the divine. However, to awaken the sense of the divine, that's what he says, you need to have something. That's what he says, Be'ein Sof Atzmi. It's not the haflah. You're sensing the divine. Like, for example, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. There's no hasbonus altogether. There's no effort. What's happening? You don't even sense the grandeur. You're just sensing godliness. It's a Hergish Ein Sof. Midas don't have that. A Midah can't have that. A Midah needs to be trained. It needs to be told. It needs to be taught, educated, that this is good for you. So that's what he's saying here. The confusing thing is it's hard to know which Rus Liba he's speaking about in each one of these. Like if you spoke Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, it's very easy to understand this piece. Because basically, it's an awakening. It has nothing to do with any contemplation. It's the other one, Aldei Hizbonus, that gets more complicated because is it the Hizbonus that's bringing it? Is it the Ava B'Tainugim?
So how would that fit into...
So I think that's really, the parentheses is really I think going into those things. So the first distinction is this is Midah, this is Ratzon, Bittul, and Metzius. The second is the Eifen, that Ratzon only by Tam V'das has to be concealed. But Usa Deliva fundamentally, you don't have to conceal Seichel, because Seichel is not a stira to Hergesh of Ein Sof. That's what it sounds like, exactly. The only reason Seichel has to be concealed for the Ratzon is when the Ratzon is connected to Seichel, because it's coming from it. But fundamentally, a Rusa Deliba is not connected to Seichel, so Rusa Deliba can reside side by side with Seichel. Midas cannot. And the third point is that Midas are only awakened through Seichel, and Rusa Deliba is basically a sense of God that sometimes you come to through appreciating the grandeur, but it's from the Hergesh of Elikus of Ein Sof that really gets him. So in the case of a midah, the hisbonus is not coming to make the midah feel the essence of the divine. It's coming to explain to the midah, this is good for you. It's like telling an animal, do this because it's good for you, you'll get food. Here, it's coming to teach you, it's coming to bring you to the and what we learned, according to what we learned before chapter 151, seemingly they're similar. What's similar? I think what's similar is the hafla, the grandeur, that brings you to the Hergesh Ein Sof. So they're similar because they're both dealing with the Ein Sof, but let's see what he says here. Yeah. Okay, so he's adding now. According to what he said before, you could even say that the contemplation in the grandeur of the divine brings you to the Hergesh of the divine, the feeling of the divine, but that's still a different world than Midas, even if it's coming through contemplation. Because in Midas, like he says here, however, in Midas, the Bechein, which is the actual result, is far lower than Meichen. It's not going higher, it's going lower. It's going into teaching the Midah that you should follow this way because it's good for you. Hold on a second. Let me just finish till the end here. And Rusa Deliba is the other way. It's a Be'ilei Rav. It's very exalted. And because the sensing the Ein Sof is that he loses the Hergesh Sichli that we've been talking about. In other words, by Midas, the reason you lose Seichel is because you can't have the two working side by side. He's going back now. But here, the reason you lose Seichel is because now you're in a state of Ein Sof. You're connecting to Ein Sof. So Seichel is insignificant. In other words, there's two reasons Seichel can be insignificant. Either because you're lower than it and you're too subjective, or because you're higher than it and it doesn't matter what Seichel says. It's a very deep piece here. This is heavy duty. You understand the difference?
Yes.
So some person doesn't care about Seichel, the other person, Seichel is Maval.
Is the reason the two can't...
That's a big. Let me just finish to make sure I'm right here. Yeah, I think the key crux of this whole thing is in this last few lines. That's where he brings it all together.
We say that all the rules of the libas are the same. It's just because.
Hold on. Let me just finish the parentheses for my own peace of mind. The gam, another reason, is mishum deseres harotzon misalam inyan haseichel, because when you're awakening rotzon, you're climbing higher than seichel. So it's not just that Ein Sof, it's just you're higher. You're now in a desire state, no longer in a. Ubecholze ikasibas aduver. And with all this, ubecholze, the primary reason the midas rotzon ha'asoi, the midas is a forced desire. It's called a love that is dependent on something because you have to convince it, impose upon it. Maybe it's a fourth reason possible. Shekol ikar ha'avi ma'aseichel. So that all the primary part of the love is coming from seichel. Brus liba hu rotzon atzmi. Rotzon brus liba, the desire of the heart is a core desire within the soul. She'ena toli b'davar. That's not contingent, not dependent on anything. And seichel is only meant to lead you to that core place. To reveal that core desire. And look what it says later, chapter 366 and 367. Okay, it's starting to emerge. Step 2 is not so clear to me. Step 3 is far, far clearer. For oid. That oid is key. For oid of midas. It goes both ways. I'll just say one thing and then we'll conclude here. It goes both ways with midas and seichel. And midas and rotzen. It's written in a very dense way. But he's basically giving a fundamental distinction between a person's emotions and a person's desires. When I say desire, I mean like core desires. You may remember that we learned in a chapter, many chapters ago, I think in the 30s or 40s, he said that the ava natural loves that we have, like for things that are natural, is not midas, it's rotzen. That we want, like we love survival or something like that. Or no, not avativus, rotzen, I just told you. But and that midas means midas that you actually create, you actually generate. But I don't know if that's so relevant here. I just mentioned it because it seemed connected. But the key thing that he wants to say is that the relationship between midas and seichel is very different than the relationship between rotzen and seichel. There's a relationship, but rotzen and seichel, the different distinctions. One is rotzen and seichel are two worlds. That's clear. Midas and seichel are not necessarily two worlds because the midah will not come without the seichel. The rotzen doesn't need the seichel to be there. It just needs the seichel to awaken it. In the midah is a selfish midah. It needs the seichel to train it. Without it, the midah is going to be selfish. So that's one key thing. That's what the last thing he said. Working our way backwards, our next distinction is the other way around. That seichel can be there while the rotzen is there. Seichel can't be there while the midah is there. They contradict each other.
Which is not clear, like you said.
And the first point that he made was that seichel fundamentally is simply feeling yourself, and rotzen is about nullifying yourself. Midas is nullifying, is feeling yourself, and rotzen is nullifying yourself. The complicated part comes when Rusa Deliba is through his barnus and Pitam Badas. Because there you have, it's coming from it, but it's not it. And it also is concealed because once you have the Seirus, you don't need the Seichel. But he threw in the loop that throws in is that there's a Rusa Deliba that's there, Bizgalus, take of his Galus HaSeichel. If he didn't throw that in, it would be very smooth.
And it's nevad afterwards.
It doesn't say it's nevad. No, it's not nevad.
The opposite.
There's another one that's nevad. Al Pitam Badas is nevad. That's what he says. Let me see.
The other Ratzon is Pitam Badas is what we talked about at the bottom. That's the Ahav Matili the Duffer.
He says Umeshuma Hergish to Ein Soif in the last who should have the Hergish Sichli. So that's not a.
Well, let me see. Where do you see that?
He says that's in the last, in the end of in the third distinction or whatever.
And he says it at the beginning.
Yeah. Umeshuma Hergish Ein Soif should never the Hergish Sichli.
It's Yisayirus. If you look, Yisayirus, Yisayirus, he be'es taking Fiskalis or Amoichin. The time when it's actually Nisayir, when it's awakened. And then maybe later on in that.
I'm not sure. I don't think it's correct because he also says Berus Hamavur Kan. I need to figure out what Hamavur Kan is as opposed to somewhere else. Which is Kan? In the parentheses or outside the parentheses? Or in this Maimad outside as opposed to other Maimadim? It's a little complicated. Anyway, we'll still go through it. At least we're making some progress. It's not the first time. I intentionally want to do this because, especially on the record, this is Nistim da Berechen Ditzain. It's called Berechen the Cup. Does anybody have it clear?
It's clear now.
It's clearer. That's the right one.
Ratzon is L'mayla Matam V'das and Midas is L'mayla Matam V'das.
That's for sure. That's the easiest part. That was the last thing he said, but the Rebbe Rashab reserved. He reserved the easiest for last.
It's Ikar.
No, but he's talking about the Ratzon She'al Pitam V'das.
No, that's
Now you're explaining this. I want to explain this.
That's really Midas.
So in this week's parsha, they touch an idiom which is Nogay over here.
So if you want,
that's why
if you want, after
Isha
the
Tazriya, the
Malkin,
Noil
it's
itself.
complete.
It brings out 3 inyanim. There's an inyan.
Let me just conclude this in 1 second. Okay, let's conclude here. I did another section in chapter 158. Looks like this chapter is going to go down in history as being more parts than others. And we continued page 313 through the bottom of 314.